They say every wolf knows their song from the moment they first shift. That the howl rises from somewhere ancient and undeniable, a voice that belongs to the moon itself. They say it's instinct, birthright, the very proof that you're alive. I've never made a sound. Not when I first shifted at 13, my bones cracking into a form that should have felt like coming home. Not when my pack gathered under the full moon, their voices rising in harmony while I stood silent among them, throat burning with the effort of producing nothing. Not even when my mother died, and grief should have torn the cry from my very soul. Silence. Always silent. They called me broken, cursed, an abomination wearing wolf skin. And maybe they were right, because what kind of wolf exists without a voice? What kind of shifter can't call to their pack, can't warn of danger, can't sing to the moon that gave them life? My name is Lunara Thorne, and I am the wolf who cannot howl. For 23 years, I've lived as a ghost in my own pack. Present but unheard. Seen but never truly known. I learned to communicate in other ways, through written words, through gestures, through the expressive tilt of my ears in wolf form. I learned to be useful enough that they wouldn't cast me out, quiet enough that they could forget my strangeness. I thought that would be my entire existence. A silent shadow, living on the edges of pack life, grateful for scraps of belonging. Then the Silence King sent out his decree. Every unmated wolf in the 7 territories would compete for his hand. Not through displays of strength or beauty or bloodline, but through a challenge so strange that 5 years of attempts had yielded nothing but failure and madness. The king sought someone who could hear what no one else could hear. Someone who could understand the language of silence itself. 362 wolves had tried. 362 had returned hollow-eyed and changed, speaking of tests that broke them in ways they couldn't explain. Some lost their voices entirely. Others couldn't stop screaming. And now, standing in my pack's meeting hall with my father's hand heavy on my shoulder, I understood why he'd called this gathering. Why did he look at me not with a father's love, but with a gambler's calculation? Lunara will compete, he announced to the assembled pack. It's perfect, don't you see? A wolf who cannot howl, entering a challenge about silence. If anyone can succeed, it's her. He made it sound like an opportunity, like honor, like choice. But I saw the truth in his eyes. I was expendable, useful at last. A broken daughter who might finally earn her keep by solving an impossible riddle, or by being destroyed trying. The Silence King's castle waited in the northern mountains, wrapped in mist and mystery. They said he'd been cursed 7 years ago, transformed into something that existed between wolf and man, trapped in a prison of his own silence. They said his challenge would break you or remake you, and no one who entered ever came out the same. I had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to pack what little I owned, to say goodbye to a pack that had never truly wanted me, to steel myself for whatever waited in those mist-shrouded halls. 3 days before I would meet the king who couldn't speak, and discover that sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones that can never be voiced aloud. Sometimes the answer to an impossible question isn't about finding your voice. It's about learning to listen to the silence between heartbeats and hearing everything that words could never say. Chapter 1. The Gift of Silence. 3 days until departure. The leather journal hit my desk with a thud, years of careful writing compressed into one worn binding. I stared at the pages I'd filled with observations, questions, fragments of poetry that could never be spoken aloud. This was my voice, the only one I'd ever had. You're really going? I turned to find Maria standing in my doorway. My younger sister, golden-haired and perfect, blessed with a howl so beautiful that wolves from neighboring packs had traveled just to hear her sing. Everything I should have been. I nodded, reaching for the small chalkboard I kept by my bed. No choice. There's always a choice. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Father can't actually force you to compete. You could refuse. Run, even. And where? I wrote, the chalk scratching sharp against slate. I'm already a burden here. At least this gives them hope I might be useful. You're not a burden. But Maria's voice lacked conviction. We both knew the truth. In a pack where strength was measured by the power of your howl, by your ability to communicate during hunts and coordinate during battles, I was a liability. A weak link that could get others killed. I erased the board and wrote again. Tell me about the Silence King. Mireia sat on my bed, pulling her knees to her chest. The rumors are contradictory. Some say he's a monster, that the curse transformed him into something inhuman. Others say he's still beautiful, still powerful, just trapped. Unable to shift fully, unable to speak, unable to connect. What kind of curse is that? Love, Mireia said quietly. Or the breaking of it. 7 years ago, King Valor was engaged to a princess from the Eastern Territory. The day before their wedding, he called it off. No explanation, no warning. She was a witch as well as a wolf, and in her rage, Mireia gestured vaguely. She cursed him to live as he'd made her feel. Silenced, isolated, trapped between forms, belonging nowhere. I wrote faster. And the challenge? No one really knows. Each competitor faces something different. The only pattern is that it has to do with silence, with communication beyond words. One wolf said the king showed her visions without speaking. Another said he asked her questions she could only answer in her mind. A third claimed the challenge was simply to spend 3 days in his presence without going mad from the quiet.
What happened to them?
Mireia's expression darkened. The first one stopped speaking entirely. Hasn't said a word in 3 years. The second became obsessed with mind magic, convinced she could still hear the king's voice in her thoughts. Drove herself to madness. The third. She swallowed. The third killed herself 2 weeks after returning. Left a note saying the silence had followed her home. The chalk snapped in my hand. Lunara. Mireia reached out, catching my wrist. Don't go.
Please.
I know father's pushing this, and I know the pack sees you as expendable, but you're my sister. I don't want to lose you to whatever darkness lives in that castle. I stared at her perfect face, heard the fear in her perfect voice, and felt the familiar ache of loving someone who could never truly understand. Mireia had a voice. She had a place. She had a future full of choices and possibilities. I had silence, and a father who saw me as a tool, and a pack that tolerated my existence out of obligation. I'm already lost, I wrote. Maybe being broken is exactly what's needed to win. That's not. Thank you for caring, I interrupted, the chalk moving swift and final. But this is my choice. Finally, something I'm choosing for myself. It wasn't entirely true, but Mireia didn't need to know that. She didn't need to carry the weight of our father's manipulation, or the pack's subtle relief at my departure. Let her think I was brave. Let her think I believed I could win. Let her keep her voice, her hope, her place in the world. I would go to the Silence King's castle. I would face his impossible challenge. And if I failed when I failed, at least I would fail on my own terms. At least I would see the world beyond these pack lands before the silence swallowed me completely. 2 days until departure. The pack healer's cabin smelled of herbs and wolf sage, the pungent mixture that helped shifters maintain control during forced transformations. Elsinore looked up from her mortar and pestle as I entered, her ancient eyes knowing. Lunara Thorne. She set aside her work. I wondered when you'd come. I pulled out my chalkboard. I need to know about the curse. The real story, not rumors. Elsinore gestured to a chair, moving to prepare tea with the efficiency of long practice. Your father doesn't want you asking questions. He wants you to be ignorant and compliant. Then it's good I'm not asking him. A rare smile crossed the healer's weathered face. Sit. I'll tell you what I know, though I warn you. The truth is stranger than any rumor. I sat, accepting the tea she pressed into my hands. Its warmth seeped through the ceramic, grounding me. King Valor was one of the most powerful alphas in living memory, Elsinore began, settling into her own chair. His howl could be heard across 3 territories. His presence commanded instant respect. But he was also different. Thoughtful where others were impulsive. Gentle where others were brutal. He believed in leading through wisdom rather than force. She paused, sipping her tea. The princess he was engaged to, Serenia Darkwater, was his perfect match. Brilliant, powerful, beautiful. Their union would have created an unprecedented alliance. But 3 days before the wedding, Valor called it off.
Why?
That's what drove Serenia mad. He never told her, never explained, just ended the engagement and retreated into his castle. When she demanded answers, he said only that he couldn't marry her. That would be wrong for reasons he couldn't speak aloud. I frowned, writing quickly. That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
Unless... Elsinore leaned forward, her voice dropping. Unless he was protecting her from something. Unless he knew something about himself, about his future, that made the marriage impossible. The curse came after he rejected her.
True.
But, Lunara, I've studied curses for 60 years. They don't work the way most people think. You can't just curse someone to be silent. Magic requires truth, resonance. The curse must already exist inside the person. The witch just awakens it. Make it external. Understanding prickled down my spine. You're saying Valor was already silent in some way. I'm saying the curse revealed something that was always there. Whatever Serenia did, she didn't create his condition. She exposed it, made it visible, undeniable, impossible to hide. Then what's the challenge really about? Elsinore's gaze was steady, ancient, knowing. Finding someone who can see past the curse to the truth underneath. Someone who understands that silence isn't absence, it's a different kind of presence. Someone who doesn't need words to hear what matters. The tea burned hot against my throat as I swallowed. Someone like me, perhaps. Or perhaps someone who can teach the king what you've already learned, that being voiceless doesn't mean being powerless. That communication runs deeper than sound. She reached across, covering my hand with hers. But Lunara, understand this. The challenge breaks people because it forces them to confront their deepest fear. For those who rely on their voice, on their ability to command and persuade and connect through sound, being stripped of it is unbearable. I've lived with it my entire life.
Exactly.
Which means your test will be different. The king won't take what you already lack. He'll test something else. Something you do have that you've learned to rely on in place of your voice. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote.
What?
That, Elsinore said gently, you'll have to discover yourself. One day until departure. I spent my last day in the Packlands doing something I'd never done before. I walked through the territory with my head high, my spine straight, unashamed. I visited the places I'd loved in silence. The creek where I'd learned to fish with my hands, communicating with the water through patience instead of sound. The ridge where I'd watched countless sunsets, painting the sky's colors in my journal since I couldn't sing them. The ancient oak where my mother used to take me, before sickness claimed her, whispering that silence was a gift if I could learn to unwrap it. At each place, I left something behind.
A stone by the creek.
A page from my journal at the ridge. A sketch of my mother at the oak's roots. Pieces of the wolf I'd been, offered to the land that had raised me even as the pack had rejected me. By the time I returned home, twilight had painted everything in shades of purple and gold. My pack was gathering for the evening howl, the ritual that united them, that I could only ever observe. Mireia found me at the edge of the gathering, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Last chance, she whispered. You could still stay. I shook my head, pulling her into a hug. Against her ear, I couldn't speak the words I wanted to say. But I held her tight, hoping she could feel them anyway. Thank you for being the only one who tried to hear me. When she pulled back, I saw my father watching from across the clearing. Alpha Fenric Thorne, cold and calculating, seeing me as a chess piece even now. He nodded once, not affection, just acknowledgement. You're dismissed, that nod said. You're finally useful. Don't waste it. I turned away before he could see my expression. Before he could see that I understood exactly what I was to him and that I'd stopped caring about his approval years ago. Tomorrow, I will leave for the Silence King's castle. Tomorrow, I will face whatever impossible test awaits. Tomorrow, I would discover if a wolf without a howl could win a challenge built on silence itself. But tonight, I stood at the edge of my pack and watched them sing to the moon. I watched their voices rise in harmony, in power, in the pure joy of being heard. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wish I could join them. Because maybe, just maybe, the Silence King would understand what no one else ever had. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen. That sometimes silence speaks louder than any howl. That sometimes being broken in one way makes you whole in another. The moon hung full and heavy above me, and though I couldn't sing to her, I felt her light settle over my shoulders like a blessing. See me, I thought, tilting my face to her glow. Not what I lack, but what I am. And in the silver light, in the space between the pack's voices and my own silent presence, I felt something shift. Not a cure, not a miracle, just readiness. Tomorrow, everything will change. Tonight, I was still Lunara Thorne, the wolf who couldn't howl. But maybe, in the Silence King's castle, I would discover what song I'd been meant to sing all along. Chapter 2. The Castle of Whispers. The carriage that came for me was black as midnight, pulled by horses whose hooves made no sound on the dirt road. Even the wheels turned silently, as if the entire vehicle existed in a pocket of muted reality. My father handed me up without ceremony, pressing a sealed letter into my palm. For the king. It explains your condition. So, he understands the disadvantage you bring. I stared at the letter, then at him. Even now, even as I left to face an impossible challenge, he framed my silence as weakness, as something to apologize for. I tucked the letter into my bag without opening it. If I survived the challenge, maybe I'd read it. Maybe I'd finally see exactly how my father described his voiceless daughter to the world. Or maybe I'd burn it unread and let his words turn to ash. The driver was a woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. She hadn't spoken since arriving, just gestured me into the carriage with efficiency that suggested she'd done this many times before. 362 times, I thought, settling into the velvet seat. 362 wolves before me, all returning broken or mad or dead. The carriage lurched forward, and I watched my packlands disappear behind a curtain of morning mist. Mireia stood at the edge of the territory, one hand raised in farewell. I pressed my palm against the window glass, a gesture she'd never see, but one I needed to make anyway. Goodbye, I thought. If I don't come back, remember that I chose this. That for once, I had agency in my own story. The journey took 3 days, though time felt strange inside the silent carriage. We traveled through territories I'd only read about. The crimson forests where wolves ran red as rust, the crystal caves where underground packs made their homes, the whispering plains where the wind supposedly carried voices of the dead. At each stop, the driver would gesture me out to stretch, to eat, to shift and run if I needed. But she never spoke, never tried to communicate beyond basic hand signals and knowing glances. On the second night, camped beside a stream that bubbled soundlessly over smooth stones, I pulled out my chalkboard. How many have you taken to the castle? The driver looked up from the fire she was building, a fire that crackled without sound, flames dancing in eerie silence. For a long moment, I thought she wouldn't respond. Then she pulled out her own piece of chalk and a small slate board from her pack. 362 before you. My breath caught. You can't speak either. The king's curse spreads. Her chalk moved swiftly and certain. Those who serve him long enough begin to lose their voices. Gradually, like a candle burning down. I have perhaps a year before silence claims me completely. Then why stay? She smiled, sad and knowing. Because he needs someone who understands. Because serving a silent king when you're losing your own voice feels like solidarity. Like we're walking the same path toward the same darkness, just at different speeds. I sat back, processing this. The Silence King's curse wasn't contained. It leaked out, infected those around him, spread like a contagion through sound itself. What was his voice like? Before? The driver's expression softened. Like thunder and honey. Command wrapped in gentleness. He could end a war with a speech or comfort a child with a whisper. His voice was his greatest gift. And the curse took it?
No.
She underlined the word twice. He gave it up. The curse just made permanent what he'd already chosen. I don't understand. You will. She set aside her board, gesturing toward the carriage. We will arrive tomorrow.
Rest.
You'll need your strength. But sleep was impossible. I lay in the carriage, watching stars roll overhead through the window, and wondered what kind of king would choose silence. What could possibly be worth surrendering the very thing that made him powerful? By the time dawn broke pale and cold, I had no answers. Only questions that multiplied like rabbits, breeding anxiety in the pit of my stomach. The castle appeared suddenly, materializing from mist as if it had been waiting just beyond vision. It wasn't the dark, foreboding fortress I'd expected. Instead, it looked like something carved from moonlight, pale stone that seemed to glow from within, towers that reached toward the sky like fingers, gardens visible even from a distance, lush and overgrown and beautiful in their wildness. It looks lonely, I thought, like something waiting for someone to see it. The gates stood open, no guards visible. The driver pulled the carriage through, and I noticed how the sound of hooves and wheels returned suddenly, jarringly, as if we'd passed through an invisible barrier. We're beyond the silence field, the driver said, her voice startling after days of quiet. Rough and scratching, like something rarely used. Inside the castle grounds, sound exists. But be warned, the king himself carries silence wherever he goes. She helped me down, then pulled my single bag from the carriage. Someone will come for you. Wait in the entrance hall. Don't wander. The castle has a way of keeping those who get lost. Keeping them how? But the driver was already climbing back onto her seat. She looked at me one last time, something like pity in her ancient eyes. I hope you're different, Lunara Thorne. I hope you survive what breaks the others. But understand, survival isn't the same as winning. Some wolves leave here intact, but changed. They keep breathing, but something essential is gone. Then she was driving away, the carriage disappearing back into the mist, and I stood alone before the castle entrance. The doors were twice my height, carved with scenes I couldn't quite make out. Wolves and humans and something in between, all twisted together in a dance or a battle or both. I pushed, and they swung open silently, revealing an entrance hall that stole my breath. It was beautiful and terrible at once. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness. Columns that reached toward a ceiling painted with constellations. Tapestries showing wolves mid-hunt, their mouths open in howls I could almost hear. And everywhere flowers. Growing from cracks in the stone, climbing the columns, spreading across the walls like beautiful invasions. The castle was eating itself, I realized. Nature was reclaiming it, slowly and gorgeously, turning stone into garden. You must be the newest challenger. I spun to find a woman emerging from a side corridor. She was perhaps 40, with dark hair threaded with silver and eyes that assessed me with clinical interest. She wore practical clothes, trousers and a tunic, boots meant for walking, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who belonged. I reached for my chalkboard. I know, she said before I could write. Lunara Thorne, the wolf who cannot howl. Your father's letter preceded you. Her expression soured. Apologizing for your existence, as if silence is something shameful. Have you read it? I read all the correspondence. I'm Calliope, the king's advisor and the only permanent resident of this castle besides His Majesty himself. She moved closer, studying me with unsettling intensity. You're different from the others. They came with hope or ambition or desperation. You came with acceptance. Is that bad? It's unusual. Most people fighting a curse need to believe they can win. You look like you're just curious to see what breaks you. Calliope tilted her head. Why did you come, really? Not the story you told your pack. The truth. I hesitated, then wrote carefully. Because I wanted one choice in my life that was mine, even if the choice leads nowhere good. Honest. Calliope nodded slowly. The king values honesty. Rare thing, in a world where everyone's trying to impress or manipulate. She gestured toward a staircase.
Come.
I'll show you to your rooms. The challenge doesn't begin until tomorrow at moonrise. You have time to rest, to explore the castle grounds, to prepare yourself. Can I meet the king?
No.
He doesn't see challengers before the test. Prevents any possibility of influence or premature judgment. Calliope started walking, clearly expecting me to follow. But I can tell you about him if you'd like. Answer questions. Most challengers are too nervous to ask. I followed, my footsteps echoing in the vast halls. What's he like? Complicated. Powerful despite the curse, perhaps because of it. He's learned to communicate in other ways, through writing, through gestures, through a kind of intentional presence that's hard to explain until you experience it. She led me up 3 flights of stairs, each landing opening onto different corridors. The curse didn't break him. It transformed him. Made him different, yes, but not less. The others who challenged. Why did they fail? Calliope paused at a doorway, her hand on the handle. Because they needed him to be what they expected. Needed him to fit their image of what a king should be. And when he couldn't speak, couldn't command with his voice, couldn't perform kingship the way they understood it. She shrugged. They broke against their own expectations. The test isn't about him, Lunara. It's about the challenger. About what you bring, what you assume, what you can't let go of. She pushed open the door, revealing a room that made my chest tighten. It was beautiful, a 4-poster bed with silk curtains, windows overlooking the wild gardens, a writing desk stocked with paper and ink and journals. But it was the walls that caught me.
Books. Hundreds of them.
Floor to ceiling, every available space lined with volumes.
Why?
Your father's letter mentioned you right. That you've filled journals for years, using written words where others use spoken ones. Calliope moved into the room, running her fingers along the book spines. The king thought you might appreciate having access to others' words, since you've been collecting your own for so long. Something hot and dangerous swelled in my chest. The Silence King, who'd never met me, understood something fundamental that my own pack had missed. That written words weren't compensation for spoken ones. They were their own form of power. Thank you, I wrote, the chalk trembling slightly. Don't thank me. Thank him when you meet. Calliope moved toward the door. Dinner will be brought to your room. The gardens are safe to explore, but stay out of the East Wing. That's the king's private domain. She paused at the threshold. And Lunara? Whatever you think you know about curses, about silence, about what you'll face tomorrow, you're wrong. Everyone is. The test is never what challengers expect. Then she was gone, the door closing with a soft click, and I was alone in a room full of books and silence. I moved to the window, looking out over gardens that had gone wild and beautiful. Somewhere in this castle, the Silence King waited. Cursed, isolated, seeking something that 362 wolves hadn't been able to provide. What am I doing here? I thought, pressing my palm against the cool glass. What made me think I could succeed where so many others failed? But even as the doubt crept in, I felt something else. Curiosity, yes, but also recognition. As if some part of me had been waiting for this. As if every silent year of my life had been preparation for this exact moment. I pulled out my journal and began to write, documenting everything. The journey, the castle, Calliope's words. But also my fears, my questions, the strange feeling that I was walking into something far larger than a simple challenge. Tomorrow at moonrise, I wrote. Tomorrow I meet the Silence King and discover what test awaits a wolf who's already mastered the art of being unheard. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, I will find out if silence can speak louder than any howl. The sun set slowly, painting the gardens in shades of gold and crimson. And somewhere in the castle, I felt rather than heard a presence. Watching, waiting, wondering if I would be different. If I would be the one who finally understood. Chapter 3. The Test of Echoes. I didn't sleep. How could I, knowing that moonrise would bring whatever impossible test had broken 362 wolves before me? Instead, I spent the night reading by candlelight, pulling book after book from the shelves, searching for any mention of curses, of silence, of challenges that stripped away sanity. Most were fiction, love stories and adventure tales, philosophy and poetry. But tucked between volumes of romantic verses, I found something different. A journal, leather-bound and worn, with no name on the cover. Inside, handwriting that shifted and changed as the pages progressed. Day 1. I came here believing I could win through strength, that my alpha bloodline and powerful howl would be enough. The king hasn't even appeared yet, but already I feel the silence pressing in. How does he stand it? Day 2. The test began. I can't describe it.
Can't explain.
He showed me something, made me see something about myself. I ran. I'm ashamed, but I ran. Day 3, I'm leaving. The king released me from the challenge. Said I wasn't ready. Wasn't ready for what? To face myself? To admit what I've always known but refused to acknowledge? The entry ended there. I flipped through more pages, finding journal after journal hidden among the books. Different handwriting, different wolves, but similar themes. He didn't speak, but somehow I heard everything he needed to say. And I hated what I heard.
The test isn't about him.
It's about facing the thing you've been running from your entire life. I thought I was brave. I thought I was strong. He showed me I was just loud. I read until my eyes burned, until the candle guttered low, until gray dawn light began creeping through the windows. And a pattern emerged from all those desperate, broken words. The Silence King's test wasn't about solving riddles, or proving worth, or demonstrating power. It was about confrontation. With yourself, with truth, with a thing you'd buried so deep you'd forgotten it was there. But I already know what I am, I thought, closing the last journal. I know I'm broken, voiceless, different. What else is there to confront? A knock at my door made me jump. Calliope entered without waiting for a response, carrying a tray of food. You should eat, she said, setting it on the writing desk. The challenge can last anywhere from hours to days. You'll need your strength. I reached for my chalkboard, but my hands were shaking too badly to write clearly. Calliope noticed. Fear is natural, even expected. But Lunara, understand, the king doesn't want you to fail. He's not some monster testing wolves for entertainment. He's searching. Desperately, exhaustingly searching. For what? For someone who can exist in silence, without needing to fill it. Someone who can hear what isn't said. Someone who understands that communication doesn't require sound. She sat on the edge of my bed. For 7 years, he's been alone. Completely, devastatingly alone. Everyone who comes here either fears his silence or tries to fix it. No one just accepts it. Is that what he wants? Acceptance? I think he wants understanding. There's a difference. Calliope stood, moving toward the door. Moonrise is in 2 hours. I'll come to escort you to the testing chamber. Wear something comfortable. You may need to shift. After she left, I forced myself to eat, though the food tasted like ash. My mind kept returning to those journals, to the pattern of wolves arriving confident and leaving shattered. They all had something to lose, I realized. Pride or status or their sense of self. But what do I have that the test could take? The answer came swift and unwelcome. Hope. The tiny, buried hope that maybe I'm not as broken as everyone says. Maybe my silence means something. I pushed the thought away and dressed carefully. Simple clothes that could withstand transformation, leather pants, and a tunic that would tear away easily if I shifted. I braided my hair back from my face and stared at myself in the mirror. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes that had learned to speak since my mouth could not. I looked tired.
Young.
Terrified. This is who I am, I thought. This is what I bring to the challenge. Not strength or power or alpha blood. Just me. Broken, silent, stubbornly still breathing. The knock came exactly at moonrise. Calliope stood in the hallway, her expression carefully neutral. Ready. I nodded, though I'd never been less ready for anything in my life. She led me through corridors I hadn't seen before, deeper into the castle's heart. The architecture changed as we walked, less ornate, more primal. Stone gave way to rough-hewn rock. Tapestries disappeared, replaced by walls carved with symbols I couldn't read. We were descending, I realized, moving underground, into the castle's foundation. Finally, Calliope stopped before a door that seemed to absorb light. She pulled a key from around her neck and unlocked it, the mechanism clicking loud in the silence. Beyond this point, I can't accompany you. The challenge is between you and the king alone. She met my eyes. Remember, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about the truth. Whatever he shows you, whatever you see, don't lie. Not to him, not to yourself. Dishonesty is the only thing that makes the test unbearable. What if I don't know the truth? Then say that. Uncertainty is honest. She pushed the door open, revealing stairs spiraling down into darkness. He's waiting. Good luck, Lunara Thorne. I genuinely hope you're different. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me with finality. The stairs descended for what felt like eternity, lit by phosphorescent moss growing on the walls. The air grew cooler, heavier, charged with something I could name. Magic, maybe, or just the weight of expectation from 362 failures. At the bottom, another door. This one was already open. Beyond it lay a chamber unlike anything I'd imagined. Circular, carved from living rock, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch infinitely upward. The walls were covered in mirrors, hundreds of them, every size and shape, reflecting light from sources I couldn't identify. And in the center, sitting absolutely still on a simple wooden chair, was the Silence King. He was not what I expected.
Tall, yes.
Powerful in build, with shoulders that spoke of strength. Dark hair that fell to his shoulders, dark eyes that tracked me as I entered. But it was his stillness that struck me. He didn't move, not a finger, not a breath, nothing. He simply existed, present and watching. I moved closer, my footsteps echoing strangely in the mirrored space. When I was 10 feet away, he raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, and gestured to a chair placed opposite his. I sat. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other. I expected fear, but instead felt something else.
Curiosity.
Recognition. As if I were looking at a reflection, not in the mirrors around us, but in him. He's like me, I thought. Trapped in silence, learning to exist without the thing everyone else takes for granted. The king reached into his jacket and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. He wrote something, then turned it to face me. Why did you come? My hands shook as I pulled out my chalkboard. The chalk felt slippery in my grip. Because my father sent me. Because I had no choice. He shook his head slowly, took back the paper, wrote again. That's the external reason. What's the internal one? Why did you come? I stared at the question, feeling it dig beneath my skin like a hook. The truth rose up, ugly and undeniable. Because I wanted to matter. Just once, I wanted to be chosen for something. Even if it's just being the sacrifice sent to the cursed king. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Wrote again.
Honest. Good.
The test requires honesty. Are you ready to begin? What do I have to do? Look in the mirrors.
Tell me what you see.
That was it? That was the test that had broken hundreds of wolves? I stood, confused, and walked to the nearest mirror. My reflection stared back. Normal. Expected. I see myself, I said with my hands, signing the words since I couldn't speak them. The king shook his head. He stood, moving with liquid grace, and touched the mirror's surface. It rippled like water. And my reflection changed. Suddenly, I was seeing myself at 13, the day I first shifted. Seeing the joy on my face as bones cracked and reformed, as fur sprouted and my body became wolf. Seeing my mouth open to howl, to sing my first song to the moon. Seeing nothing come out. Seeing the joy die. Seeing confusion replace it, then panic. Watching my young self try again and again, throat straining, chest heaving, producing only silence. Watching my mother's face fall. Watching my father's expression close off. watching other pack members exchange glances that said broken, defective, wrong. I see the day I learned I was voiceless. I signed, tears blurring my vision. The king touched another mirror. This one showed me at 15, sitting outside the meeting hall while the pack discussed what to do with me. Hearing their voices through the walls. She's a liability. Can't call for help, can't coordinate during hunts. What use is a wolf who can't communicate? Fenric, she's your daughter.
She's a mistake.
An aberration. If it weren't for pack law, I'd have cast her out years ago. My father's voice, cold and final. The voice that had shaped my entire childhood. I see the moment I learned my father wished I'd never been born. I signed. The movements jerky. Another mirror. Another scene. My mother's deathbed. Me at 16, holding her hand while she struggled to breathe. Wanting to tell her I loved her, wanting to howl my grief, wanting to make some sound that would let her know she mattered. Silence. Always silent. Watching her die, without hearing my voice one last time. I see my mother's death. I see failing to say goodbye. The mirrors kept activating. Scene after scene, memory after memory. Every moment where my silence had cost me something. Every time I'd been excluded, dismissed, treated as less than. Every pack gathering where I stood at the edges, watching others connect through howls I could never join. Every single
wound.
I sank to my knees, singing through tears. I see every moment where I wasn't enough. Every time my silence made me invisible. Every instance where having no voice meant having no value. The king knelt beside me.
He pulled out his paper, wrote.
Now look at this one. He gestured to a mirror I hadn't noticed. Larger than the others, positioned directly across from where he'd been sitting. I crawled toward it, exhausted, broken open by seeing my own pain reflected back so mercilessly. The surface rippled, and I saw myself. But different. Older, maybe, or just more solid. I stood in a clearing surrounded by wolves, all of them looking at me with respect. No, with more than respect. With trust. I saw myself signing to them, saw them watching intently, saw communication flowing without a single sound. I saw one wolf translate my signs for the others, and saw them nod in understanding. I saw myself leading. Not through howls or commands, but through presence, through written words, through the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume. I don't understand. I signed. This hasn't happened. The king wrote. Not yet. This is what you could be. What you're capable of becoming. He pointed to all the other mirrors, still showing my painful memories. These shaped you, but they don't define you. The question is, which reflection do you choose to believe? I stared at him, understanding finally beginning to dawn. The test isn't about seeing the pain. He shook his head. It's about seeing past it, about choosing which story to tell about myself. He nodded, then wrote, Every wolf who comes here carries wounds. The test shows them their pain reflected back, magnified. Most break because they can't bear to see it. They run from their own reflection. But you didn't run.
No.
I signed the word firmly. I've lived with these wounds my entire life. Seeing them in mirrors doesn't make them more real. They've always been real. So, what makes you different from the others? I thought about this carefully. About all the journals I'd read. All the wolves who'd fled in horror or madness. They came here whole and got broken. I came here already broken. There's nothing the mirrors can show me that I haven't already survived. The king went very still. Then he stood and wrote rapidly. The curse reveals what people hide from themselves. It forces them to see their deepest fear, their greatest shame, the thing they've built their entire identity to avoid acknowledging. When I look in these mirrors, I see the moment I chose silence. The moment I broke Serena's heart. The moment I became the monster everyone fears. But when you look in the mirrors, you see pain you've already processed, already survived. You've spent your entire life examining your wounds instead of hiding from them. He showed me the paper, his dark eyes intense. You've already done the work the curse requires. You've already faced yourself. That's why you're different. I read the words twice, 3 times, feeling them settle into my bones. So, I passed. He shook his head, wrote. You haven't failed. But the challenge isn't over. Now comes the harder part. What's harder than reliving every painful memory? He smiled, the first expression I'd seen on his face. Sad, knowing, absolutely devastating. Seeing mine. Chapter 4. The King's Reflection. The silence. King gestured for me to sit again. My legs were shaking from kneeling on the stone floor, from the emotional weight of watching my life's worst moments play out in glass. I sank into the chair gratefully, wiping tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. He remained standing, facing the largest mirror, the one that had shown me my potential future. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Then he touched the mirror's surface. It rippled, and the chamber filled with sound. I gasped. The Silence King's curse prevented him from speaking, but apparently, it didn't extend to his memories. The mirror wasn't just showing images, it was recreating moments complete with voices, with sound, with all the things the present lacked. The reflection showed a younger version of the king, perhaps 25, standing in a throne room. He was speaking, his voice exactly as the driver had described, thunder and honey, command wrapped in gentleness. I understand the Northern Pack's concerns, the Mirror King said, addressing a council of stern-faced wolves. But creating a treaty that favors only alphas will destabilize the entire social structure. Omegas, betas, they're not lesser. They're essential. A pack is only as strong as its weakest member's faith in the system. One council member scoffed. Your Majesty, with respect, you're young. Idealistic. The natural order has existed for millennia. Alphas lead because we're stronger. Louder. The Mirror King corrected quietly. You're louder. But strength comes in many forms. The Omega who tends wounds saves more lives than the Alpha who starts wars. The Beta who maintains supply lines wins battles before they're fought. Volume isn't victory. The scene shifted. Now the king stood in a garden with a woman who took my breath away. Serenia Darkwater was beautiful. Dark hair cascading down her back, eyes like storm clouds, a presence that demanded attention. She wore her power visibly, confidently. Valor, she said, twining her fingers through his. The wedding is in 3 days. Are you nervous? The Mirror King smiled, but I saw something in his eyes.
Doubt. Fear.
Something he was trying to hide. Not nervous. Just thinking. About whether I'm doing the right thing. Whether we're doing the right thing. Serenia's expression cooled. What do you mean? We've been engaged for a year. The alliance between our territories will reshape the political landscape. You said to yourself it was necessary. Necessary doesn't mean right. He pulled away slightly. Serenia, do you love me? Or do you love what I represent? The power, the position, the influence you'll gain? That's not fair. It's an honest question. How dare you? Serenia's voice rose, crackling with barely contained magic. I've given you everything. Supported your idealistic reforms, defended you to my pack when they said you were too soft, waited patiently while you wrestled with your doubts. And 3 days before our wedding, you questioned my feelings. I questioned mine, the Mirror King said quietly. I thought I loved you. I wanted to love you. But Serenia, when I imagine our future, I don't see partnership. I see performance. I see us playing roles, king and queen, alpha and alpha, power couple ruling through strength. What else is there? Understanding. Companionship. Someone who sees past the crown, past the power, past the voice everyone listens to. His hands clenched. Someone who would love me if I had nothing. If I were nothing. The scene shifted again, moving faster now. The throne room, 2 days before the wedding. Serenia standing before the king, her face a mask of fury and heartbreak. You're calling it off.
Just like that.
2 days before the ceremony, with 7 territories watching, with alliances negotiated and promises made, you're ending our engagement. I'm sorry. I can't marry you. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. Give me a reason. One, honest reason. The Mirror King opened his mouth, closed it, pain etched across his features. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. There are things I can't explain, Serenia. Things about myself I'm only beginning to understand. Marrying you while hiding them would be worse than calling off the wedding. You're a coward, she hissed. Hiding behind noble words while you humiliate me. While you destroy everything we've built. I know.
I'm sorry.
But I can't. Then you'll understand when I make you feel what you've made me feel. Her eyes flashed silver, magic crackling around her fingers. You want to hide? To keep your precious secrets? Fine. Let's see how you enjoy being trapped inside yourself. Let's see how you like having no voice, no way to explain, no way to make anyone understand. The curse struck like lightning, and I watched the Mirror King collapse, watched his mouth open in a scream that produced no sound, watched him clutch his throat as his voice simply stopped. When he looked up at Serenia, his eyes held not anger, but something worse. Acceptance. As if he'd been expecting this. As if he'd known this was the price of his honesty. The mirror went dark. The real king, the present king, stood with his back to me, shoulders shaking. Not with sobs, but with the kind of silent grief that goes too deep for tears. I stood slowly, moving to his side. I couldn't speak, couldn't offer verbal comfort. But I reached out and touched his arm. He flinched, then turned to look at me. His face was wet, tracks of tears shining in the mirror light. I pulled out my chalkboard, writing carefully. What were you hiding? What couldn't you tell her? He shook his head, reached for his paper. His hand trembled as he wrote. I'll show you. But Lunara, this is what breaks everyone. This is the truth that made 362 wolves run screaming. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can never look at me the same way again. I thought about all those journals hidden among the books. All those wolves who'd seen something about the king that shattered their understanding of reality, of themselves, of everything they thought they knew. Show me anyway, I wrote. I came here for the truth, even if it breaks me. He studied me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly and gestured to the central mirror, the largest one, positioned where all the others could reflect it. He touched its surface, and the chamber transformed. Suddenly, we weren't in the underground testing room anymore. We were somewhere else. A memory so vivid it felt real, so powerful it overwrote reality itself. A forest clearing.
Night.
The full moon hangs heavy overhead. The Mirror King stood in the center, younger than the previous visions. Perhaps 18 or 19. He was with another man, older, broader, wearing the bearing of an alpha. I can't do this anymore, father, the younger Veiler said. I can't keep pretending. You're my heir, his father replied, voice hard. The Alpha King in waiting. You'll do your duty. My duty isn't to live a lie. You'll lead the 7 territories. You'll be the most powerful alpha in living memory. What more could you want? To be honest about who I am. Veiler's voice cracked. Father, please. Just listen. I don't want to lead through dominance. I don't want to rule through the loudest howl. I don't want to be what everyone expects an Alpha King to be. Then what do you want? To lead through understanding. Through listening instead of commanding. Through, he stopped, gathering courage. Father, I think I'm not. I don't experience pack bonds the way other alphas do. When you talk about the thrill of dominance, the satisfaction of making others submit, the joy of being the loudest voice in the room, I don't feel any of that. His father went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I'm not meant to be what you need me to be. Maybe I'm broken in some fundamental way. Maybe. You're not broken, his father interrupted, but his voice was cold. You're weak. There's a difference. And weakness can be trained out of you. The memory shifted, moving through years and heartbeats. Veiler was forced to practice his alpha howl for hours until his throat bled. Being made to dominate younger wolves in training exercises he clearly hated. Being punished whenever he showed gentleness, whenever he listened instead of commanded, whenever he tried to lead through anything except raw power. I watched him learn to perform, To hide his true nature behind the mask of what an alpha king should be. To bury his gentleness, his thoughtfulness, his desire to understand rather than dominate. I watched him become the king everyone needed while losing the person he actually was. Then the memory shifted to a private chamber. Valor, older now, sitting with a book on psychology, on different ways of experiencing social bonds, on wolves who didn't fit the standard alpha omega beta categories. His hands were shaking as he read. It has a name, his mirror self whispered. What I am has a name. I'm not broken. I'm just different. The chamber door burst open. His father entered, saw the book, and his face darkened with rage. What is this? Research. Father, I found. You found excuses for weakness. His father grabbed the book, threw it into the fireplace. There are 3 types of wolves. Alpha, beta, omega. You're an alpha. That's all you need to be. But I don't experience dominance the way. Then you'll learn. His father grabbed him by the throat, not violently but firmly. You're my heir. You'll be king. You'll lead the 7 territories. I don't care what books tell you, what names you find for your differentness. You
are alpha.
Act like it. The memory dissolved, and we were back in the mirror chamber. The present king wrote with shaking hands. I'm not a standard alpha. Never was. I don't feel the drive to dominate, the need to be loudest, the satisfaction of making others submit. I spent my entire life forcing myself into a role that felt wrong, hiding who I really was because there was no space for an alpha who led through understanding instead of power. When I was engaged to Serenia, I realized I couldn't keep performing. Couldn't spend a lifetime hiding from my queen, from my mate, from the person who was supposed to know me best. But I couldn't explain it either. Couldn't tell her I was different in ways that would make her question the alliance, the engagement, everything we'd built. So I ended it. And when she cursed me to silence, it felt like honesty, like the outside finally matching the inside. I'd spent years silencing my true self. She just made it literal. I stared at the words, understanding flooding through me like cold water. The Silence King wasn't cursed because he was cruel or because he deserved punishment. He was cursed because he'd spent his entire life hiding his true nature, and Serenia's magic had simply exposed what he'd already done to himself. You silenced yourself first, I wrote slowly. The curse just made everyone else see it. He nodded, fresh tears tracking down his face. Every wolf who comes here expects me to be a certain way. Strong, commanding, dominant, everything an alpha king should be. And when they see I'm not, when they realize the silence isn't just a curse, but a reflection of who I actually am, they can't handle it. They need me to be the alpha. They understand. The one who fits their worldview. They run because I'm not what they need me to be. Because accepting me means questioning everything they believe about strength and leadership and what makes someone worthy of power. I set down my chalk and took his paper and pen from him. My hand was steady as I wrote. I don't need you to be anything except honest. I've spent my entire life being told I'm broken because I don't fit the standard Omega model. Because I can't howl, can't communicate the right way, can't be what everyone expects. You think I'm going to judge you for being different? He read the words, and something in his expression cracked open. Not breaking, opening. Like a door that had been locked for years finally swinging wide. You understand, he wrote, the letters almost illegible in his haste. You actually understand. Of course I understand. We're the same. I wrote faster. The words pouring out. You're an alpha who doesn't fit the alpha mold. I'm an omega who can't do what omega should do. We're both living proof that the categories are too narrow, that there are more ways to be than the world acknowledges. The others ran because they needed you to be their fantasy of a cursed king. Someone tragic, but ultimately fixable. Someone who could be saved and returned to normal. But this is not normal. There's just who we actually are. The king was reading my words over and over, his finger tracing each letter, as if memorizing them. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Hope. He wrote, stay. Please. Not for the challenge, not to break the curse. Just stay.
Talk with me.
Help me understand how you survive being different in a world that demands conformity. I'll stay, I wrote. But only if you answer one question honestly. Anything. Do you want the curse broken? Or have you gotten used to the silence? Does part of you prefer it to performing the Alpha King everyone expected? The question hung between us, heavy and dangerous. The king stared at it for a long time. Then he wrote, slowly and carefully, I want to stop being alone. I want someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't need me to be different. Whether that means breaking the curse or just finding someone who can exist in silence with me, I don't know anymore. After 7 years, I've forgotten what my own voice sounds like. I'm not sure I'd recognize it if it came back. Maybe that's what the challenge is really about, I wrote. Not breaking the curse, but finding someone who doesn't need you to be cursed or uncursed. Someone who just needs you to be you. He read this, and suddenly he was laughing, silent, shoulders shaking, head tilted back. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, joy without sound. When he finally looked at me again, he wrote, 362 wolves, and you're the first one to suggest that maybe the curse isn't the problem. Maybe the problem is everyone needing me to be something I'm not. So, what happens now? I wrote, is the challenge over? Did I pass or fail? Neither.
Both.
He stood, offered me his hand. You passed the test by not needing there to be a test. You failed to break the curse by not trying to break it. But Lunara. He pulled me to my feet, and we stood facing each other in the mirror light. Two wolves who didn't fit their assigned roles. Two souls who'd learned to exist in silence. I think you might have given me something better than a cure. What's that? Understanding. Acceptance. The first honest conversation I've had in 7 years. The mirrors around us began to dim, their surfaces going opaque. The magical memory chamber was releasing us. The test concluded in a way it had never concluded before. Not with breaking or healing or transformation. Just with two people seeing each other clearly and choosing not to look away. Chapter 5. The Language of Silence. Calliope was waiting when we emerged from the testing chamber. Her eyes widened as she took in our faces, both tear-stained, both exhausted, both somehow lighter than when we descended. You're both still here, she said, something like wonder in her voice. You didn't run. I shook my head, reaching for my chalkboard. Why would I run from someone like me? The king, Valor, I should call him Valor now, showed Calliope what he'd written. She stayed through all of it. I saw everything, and didn't need me to be different. Calliope looked between us, understanding dawning. You told her. About being. She stopped, glancing at me uncertainly. About being an alpha who doesn't experience dominance the standard way, I wrote. About spending his life performing a role that didn't fit. She knows, Valor wrote, showing Calliope. Everything. And she understands because she's lived her own version of not fitting in. Calliope sank into a chair, looking dazed. 7 years. 362 challengers. And you finally found someone who doesn't need fixing you to be the point. She laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. The curse was never going to break through someone solving you like a puzzle. It was going to break through someone accepting that you're not broken. Is it broken? I wrote. The curse? Valor touched his throat, opened his mouth experimentally. Nothing came out. He shook his head and wrote. Still silent. But it feels different. Lighter, maybe. Like something shifted even if nothing changed. The curse is tied to your self-perception, Calliope said, recovering her composure. To the belief that you need to hide who you are. If that belief is shifting. She trailed off, looking at me with a new assessment. How long are you staying, Lunara? I hadn't thought about it. The challenge was over. Technically, I could leave. Return to my pack. Report that I'd failed to break the curse. Resume my life as the voiceless Omega on the edges of pack society.
The thought made my chest ache.
How long can I stay? I wrote instead. Valor's head snapped toward me, his expression startled and hopeful. As long as you want, Calliope said. The castle has room. The king clearly wants your company. And honestly, after 7 years of watching him deteriorate in isolation, I'm not about to send away the first person who's made him laugh. He laughed. I wrote. I couldn't hear it. His shoulders shook, his head tilted back, his whole body expressed joy. Calliope said gently, "Just because there's no sound doesn't mean there's no laughter. You, of all people, should know that." She was right. I did know. I'd spent years learning to express emotions without voice, to communicate joy and sorrow and anger through gesture and expression and the tilt of my head. Valor and I weren't so different after all. "I'll stay," I wrote, the decision settling into my bones with rightness. "At least for a while. If that's acceptable." Valor wrote quickly. "More than acceptable. Please. I have so many questions. So many things I want to understand about how you've survived, how you've built a life around being different. And I want to understand your leadership philosophy," I wrote back. "How you've tried to rule, through listening instead of commanding. What that looks like in practice." Calliope stood, brushing off her trousers. "Well then, I'll have the guest room prepared for a long-term stay. Lunara, you'll need more clothes, more supplies. I'll arrange everything." She paused at the door, looking back at us. "Your Majesty, the council will want to know the results of the challenge." Valor's jaw tightened. He wrote, "Tell them the challenger is staying for an extended period, that the challenge continues. They won't like that. It's unprecedented. Everything about this is unprecedented. Let them adjust." After Calliope left, Valor and I stood in the corridor, suddenly alone and uncertain. The intensity of the testing chamber had created artificial intimacy, forced honesty through magical pressure. But now, in the ordinary world, we were strangers who happened to share similar wounds. Valor gestured toward a doorway, raising his eyebrows in question. "Where?" I wrote. He wrote back, "Library. The real one. Not just your room. I want to show you something." The castle's main library made my room's collection look like a modest shelf. It stretched across 3 floors, with spiral staircases connecting the levels and reading nooks tucked into every corner. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the books in rainbow colors. But it was the silence that struck me most. Not the cursed silence of magic, but natural quiet, the peaceful hush of a place meant for thought and reflection. Valor led me to a section on the 2nd floor, pulling books from the shelves with clear familiarity. He stacked them on a table, then gestured for me to sit. "These are what saved me," he wrote. "After my father died, I became king. After I realized I couldn't keep performing forever. These books gave me language for what I was experiencing. Proof that I wasn't alone, even when I felt entirely isolated." I examined the titles: Alternative Pack Structures, Non-Traditional Alpha Behaviors, The Spectrum of Dominance, Wolves Who Lead Through Service. "Where did you find these?" I wrote. "I've never seen books like this in any pack library. I had to search, commission scholars, send agents to distant territories, pay exorbitant amounts for texts that most packs burn." He wrote quickly, the words tumbling out. "Because acknowledging that wolves can be different threatens the entire social structure. If alphas don't have to be dominant, if omegas don't have to be submissive, if betas aren't just middle ground, then what? The whole system becomes arbitrary. Chosen rather than natural. Is that bad?" I wrote. "Choice instead of destiny. The old guard think so. They believe the moon goddess designed us with specific roles. That deviating from those roles is unnatural, wrong, worthy of punishment." He set down his pen, his expression pained. "My father believed that. Spent my entire childhood trying to force me into the alpha mold. When I kept failing to fit, he convinced himself I was choosing weakness. That I could be normal if I just tried harder. My pack believed the same about me," I wrote. "That my voicelessness was a choice. A refusal to try hard enough. They never considered that maybe I'm just built differently." Valor picked up his pen again. "Did they try to fix you?" "Constantly. Healers, shamans, witch doctors. Everyone was convinced they had the cure." I wrote faster, old pain surfacing. "One healer tried to manually manipulate my throat during a shift, thinking my vocal cords were malformed. Another convinced my father I was psychologically blocking myself and needed trauma therapy. A third said I was cursed and tried an exorcism. Did any of it work?
No.
Because there was nothing to fix. I'm not broken. I'm just not standard. I underlined the words heavily. But no one could accept that. They needed me to be fixable. There needed to be a cure. Because accepting that some wolves are just different means accepting that the moon goddess creates variations, not mistakes. Vaylor stared at my words for a long time. Then he wrote, I wish I'd met you years ago. Before the engagement, before the curse. Maybe everything would have been different. Maybe, I wrote. Or maybe we needed to live through our specific pain to understand each other. Maybe meeting earlier would have meant not being ready. He smiled, that devastating, silent expression that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made my chest tight. You're wise, he wrote. I'm practical, I corrected. Wisdom is what people call practicality when it makes them uncomfortable. This time his laugh was audible, a soft exhalation, almost a breath. But there. Not words, but sound. His hand flew to his throat, eyes wide with shock. I reached across the table, catching his wrist. Don't, I signed with my other hand. Don't hope too hard. Don't pressure yourself. If sound comes back, let it come naturally. Don't force it. How do you stay so calm about being voiceless? He wrote. How do you not rage against it every day? I raged for years, I wrote honestly. Screamed silently, cried, begged the moon goddess to fix me. But rage changes nothing. Eventually I had to choose. Spend my life mourning what I'd never have, or build something with what I did have. What did you build? Observation skills. Written communication. A different kind of presence. I wrote slowly, choosing words carefully. I learned to read body language better than any wolf in my pack. I learned to express complex thoughts through writing. Learned that people underestimate silent watchers, and that being underestimated is sometimes an advantage. You weaponized your difference. I survived it, I corrected it. There's a distinction. We spent hours in that library, trading writings back and forth, comparing experiences, discovering the 1,000 small ways our parallel lives had unfolded. How we'd both learned to mask our differences. How we'd both been told we were choosing our conditions. How we'd both internalized shame before learning to question whether shame was justified. Calliope found us at sunset, surrounded by books and papers covered in our dual handwriting. The council is demanding an audience, she said to Vaylor. They want to meet the challenger, who's been allowed to stay. Vaylor's expression darkened. He wrote, tell them tomorrow. They're insistent. They say the kingdom has a right to know what's happening with the curse. The kingdom has waited 7 years. They can wait another day. He underlined each word forcefully. I'm not performing for them tonight. Your Majesty.
No.
He stood, and despite the silence, despite the lack of commanding voice, his presence filled the library. I am still king. I still make decisions about my own time and my own guests. They will wait. Calliope studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. You seem different. Stronger, maybe. I feel different, he wrote. Like something I've been carrying for years is finally lifting. Not gone, just lighter. After Calliope left, Vaylor turned to me. I'm sorry. I know you didn't come here to be caught up in palace politics. I came here not knowing what I'd find, I wrote. This is better than most possibilities I imagined. Even though I'm still cursed? Even though I can't offer you anything except more silence? I thought about this carefully, about what I wanted from this strange situation. Not romance, we barely knew each other. Not a cure, I didn't believe in those anymore. Not even friendship exactly, though that might develop. You offer me something I've never had, I wrote finally. Someone who understands. Someone who doesn't need me to be different to be acceptable. That's worth more than sound. Vaylor read this several times, his eyes growing suspiciously bright. Then he wrote, tomorrow, I'll show you the rest of the castle. The parts one love, the places I hide when being king becomes too heavy. I'll introduce you to the gardens that grow wild, because no one tends them. I'll teach you the secret passages my father never knew existed. I'll share every corner of this place with someone who might actually see it instead of just seeing the curse. I'd like that, I wrote. And Lunara? He wrote her name carefully, as if testing how it looked in his handwriting.
Thank you.
For not running. For seeing me. For staying even when you could have left. Thank you for being honest, I wrote back. For showing me your truth even when it was terrifying. For proving that silence isn't the worst thing that can happen to a wolf. We sat in the library until full dark, until Calliope came to insist we eat dinner, until exhaustion pulled at both of us with insistent fingers. But even as I made my way to my room, my mind full of everything I'd learned, I felt something unfamiliar settling into my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Not quite content. Just possibility. The possibility that my voice wasn't the thing that defined my worth. That being different wasn't the same as being broken. That somewhere in this cursed castle with this cursed king, I might find something I'd stopped believing existed. Belonging. Not despite the silence, but within it. Not by becoming normal, but by accepting that normal was a cage designed by people who were afraid of variation. I pulled out my journal and wrote by candlelight. Day 1 in the castle after the challenge. I thought the test would break me. Instead, it introduced me to someone who's been living my life from a different angle. The Silence King is not what anyone expects. Neither am I. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the curse was never about punishment. Maybe it was about clearing away everyone who needed him to be their fantasy, until the only person left was someone who could see him clearly. Someone like me. Someone who knows that silence is just another way of speaking, if you learn the language. I blew out the candle and lay in the darkness, listening to the castle settle around me. Somewhere in his own chambers, Valor was probably doing the same. Two wolves who couldn't howl, learning to hear each other anyway. And for the first time since I'd left my packlands, I didn't feel like I was being sent away. I felt like I was coming home. Chapter 6. The Council's Judgment. Morning came too soon. Pale light filtering through my windows and pulling me from dreams of mirror chambers and silent laughter. I dressed carefully, choosing practical clothes from the wardrobe Calliope had stocked, dark trousers, a simple tunic, boots meant for walking. If Valor was going to show me the castle today, I wanted to be ready for anything. But when I emerged into the corridor, Calliope was waiting with an expression that spelled trouble. Change of plans, she said. The council showed up at dawn. They're refusing to leave without seeing both you and the king. I've stalled them as long as I can, but Lunara, they're angry. And scared. Which makes them dangerous. Why scared? I wrote. Because you stayed. Because something happened in that testing chamber that's never happened before. Because change terrifies people who benefit from the current system. She gestured down the corridor. Valor is already in the throne room. He asked me to prepare you before bringing you in. Prepare me how? The council will try to intimidate you. They'll question your worth, your background, your right to be here. They'll suggest you're taking advantage of the king, or that you've somehow manipulated him. Calliope's eyes were serious. They need you to be temporary. A failed challenger who'll leave like all the others. Because if you're not temporary, if you're actually staying, it means the king has found something they can't control. Find someone who sees him for who he is rather than who they need him to be. And that threatens them. Everything about you threatens them. An omega who can't howl, staying in the castle of an alpha who can't speak. It suggests that maybe the traditional ways aren't the only ways. Maybe silence and difference aren't weaknesses to be cured but variations to be accepted. She touched my shoulder. Be honest. Be yourself. Don't let them make you feel small. Valor wants you here. That's all that matters. Does he really? Or does he just want anyone who understands? Calliope smiled slightly. After 7 years of watching him reject everyone, I can confidently say he wants you specifically. Not just your understanding, but you. The person who wrote those words about silence being another language. The wolf who didn't run from his truth. The throne room was exactly as imposing as I'd expected. High ceilings, marble columns, windows that let in stark morning light. And seated in a semicircle before the raised throne were 7 wolves, each representing one of the territories. They turned as I entered, and I felt their assessment like a physical weight. Sizing me up. Finding me wanting. Valor sat on his throne, spine straight, expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes found mine, something in them softened. A moment of connection before we both had to face this. Calliope led me to stand beside the throne. Not in front of it, I noticed. Positioning me as advisor rather than supplicant. Valor nodded his approval. One of the council members stood. He was old, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd held power for decades and didn't intend to relinquish it. Your Majesty. Council Alpha Theron of the Western Territory. We've come to inquire about this unprecedented situation. Valor gestured to the table beside his throne where paper and pen lay ready. He wrote quickly, and Calliope read aloud. Lunara Thorne has completed the challenge and been invited to remain as a guest of the crown. That's all the council needs to know. With respect, Your Majesty, it's not. Theron's voice was sharp. 362 challengers have attempted to break your curse. All have failed and departed within days. This Omega has been here nearly a week. The kingdom has questions. Has it been a week already? I thought, disoriented. Time still moved strangely in the castle. Another council member stood, a woman with silver hair and calculating eyes. Council Alpha Yvain of the Northern Territory. Miss Thorne, is it true you cannot howl? I nodded, reaching for my chalkboard. Speak up, she commanded. I held up the board showing my response. I cannot speak either. I communicate through writing. Murmurs rippled through the council. Theron's expression hardened. An Omega who can't howl or speak. And the king invited you to stay? Forgive me, Your Majesty, but this seems unwise. What could such a wolf possibly offer the crown? Valor's hand clenched on the arm of his throne. He wrote furiously, Lunara offers understanding, intelligence, and honest companionship. Her worth isn't determined by her voice. Calliope read the words, but I saw several council members exchange skeptical glances. Understanding, Theron repeated slowly. Your Majesty, you've been cursed for 7 years. The kingdom needs its king to break this curse, to resume normal leadership. How does keeping company with a voiceless Omega advance that goal? Normal leadership, I wrote, and gestured for Calliope to read. What does that mean? Leading through the loudest howl? Through dominance and submission? What if there are other ways to lead? There are traditional ways, Yvain said coldly, established over millennia. Ways that have kept our species strong and united. Ways that require a king to command, to inspire, to rally his people through the power of his voice. Valor wrote, I led for 3 years before the curse. Through policy reform, diplomatic negotiation, and wisdom rather than volume. The kingdom thrived. The kingdom tolerated. Theron corrected. Your reforms were controversial, Your Majesty. Many thought them too radical, too soft. The curse was seen by some as inevitable, a correction of unnatural governance. The words hung in the air like poison. They were suggesting Valor had deserved the curse, that his attempt to lead differently had been wrong from the start. I watched Valor's expression shudder, watched him retreat behind walls I recognized because I'd built the same ones. The walls that said maybe they're right, maybe I am wrong, maybe I should stop trying to be different. No, I thought fiercely. Not again. Not after he finally found someone who sees him. I wrote quickly, large enough for the entire council to see. The curse didn't come because the king was unnatural. It came because his former fiancée was hurt and angry. Magic requires truth, but it also requires intention. Serenia intended to punish. That doesn't make the punishment deserved. You speak boldly for someone with no voice, Yvain observed. Tell me, Miss Thorne, what is your pack affiliation? Riverside Pack, Eastern Territory. Though I was disowned. For being voiceless? For being different in ways my pack couldn't accommodate. And now you've found another wolf who's different. How convenient. 2 outcasts clinging to each other. Theron's tone was mocking. Forgive me if the council questions whether this is genuine companionship or simple desperation. Valor stood abruptly, and the room went silent. Even without a voice, his presence commanded attention. He wrote, his hand shaking slightly with rage. Council Alpha Theron, you will show respect to my guest. Lunara's worth is not yours to judge. Her companionship is not yours to question. And if you cannot address her with basic courtesy, you can leave this throne room. Calliope's voice was steady as she read the words, but I saw surprise flicker across several council members' faces. The king is defending someone. The cursed, silent king making demands instead of acquiescing. Your Majesty, another council member spoke, a younger man with kind eyes. Council Beta Lorcan of the Southern Territory. I mean no disrespect, but the kingdom is concerned. 7 years of isolation, 7 years without an heir, 7 years of governance conducted through intermediaries. Can you understand our fear that you might be giving up? Accepting the curse instead of fighting it? Valor's expression softened slightly at Lorcan's gentler tone. He wrote, I haven't given up, but I've stopped believing that breaking the curse is the only path forward. Maybe the lesson was never about returning to who I was before. Maybe it was about accepting who I actually am. And who are you? Yvain asked, her voice sharp. A king who can't speak? An alpha who doesn't dominate? What kind of leader is that? The kind who leads through wisdom instead of volume, I wrote. The kind who values understanding over blind obedience. The kind who makes people want to follow rather than forcing them to submit. Pretty words from someone who's never led anything, Theron sneered. True, I wrote calmly. I've never led a pack or a territory or a kingdom, but I've survived being unwanted for 23 years. I've built a life despite everyone telling me I was broken. I've learned that strength comes in forms that don't require sound. And I've learned that the wolves who mock differences are usually the ones most afraid of it. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Are you calling us afraid? Yvain's voice was dangerous. I'm calling the situation what it is. You're terrified that if the king can lead while being different, it means other wolves can be different too. It means the rigid structures you've built your power on might be arbitrary. It means change is possible. And change threatens everything you've worked to maintain. That's enough, Theron snarled. Your Majesty, this Omega is clearly unsuitable. She's disrespectful. She's... Valor slammed his hand on the throne's arm, the sharp crack silencing everyone. He wrote in large, forceful letters. Lunara is honest. Something this council seems to have forgotten the value of. She sees clearly. She names truth instead of hiding behind politics. And yes, she makes you uncomfortable because she's right. You're afraid. Afraid that accepting me means questioning everything. Afraid that if an alpha doesn't have to be one specific way, your own power might be less secure than you thought. Calliope's voice rang out strong and clear as she read the words. Valor continued writing, I am still your king. Cursed or not, silent or not, different or not, I am still king. And I am telling you now, Lunara Thorne is my guest for as long as she chooses to remain. You will treat her with respect. You will stop questioning her worth. And you will start accepting that the world is changing, whether you want it to or not. The throne room was utterly silent. Then Lorcan stood, bowing slightly. Your Majesty, I apologize if my concerns were expressed poorly. Of course you have the right to invite guests. Of course Miss Thorne should be treated with respect. I think I speak for at least some of the council when I say we're not opposed to change. We're just frightened of it. And sometimes fear makes us cruel. Valor nodded slowly, acknowledging the apology. But Theron wasn't finished. Your Majesty, one more question. If you're accepting the curse, if you're giving up on breaking it, what about an heir? What about the kingdom's future? You cannot rule forever, and without a voice, without the traditional markers of leadership, how can you expect? The king expects loyalty and trust, Calliope interrupted, her voice sharp. The same things any leader should expect. Council Alpha Theron, you seem very concerned with tradition. Let me remind you of one. The king's personal life is his own. The council advises on policy, not on relationships. When the king's relationship affects the kingdom, it doesn't. I wrote, holding up my board. I'm not here as a potential queen or mate. I'm here as someone who understands what it's like to be different. Someone the king can talk to honestly. That's all. Your fear of me is about what I represent, not what I actually am. Yvain studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "You're very articulate for someone without a voice. I've had a lot of practice. And very confident for someone from a pack that disowned her." Confidence and volume aren't the same thing. Neither are silence and weakness. Something that might have been respect flickered across Yvain's face. Perhaps not. She looked at Valor. "Your Majesty, the Northern Territory supports your right to host whomever you choose. We ask only that you continue to fulfill your duties to the crown, curse or no curse." Valor nodded and wrote, "I have never stopped fulfilling those duties. The curse took my voice, not my mind." One by one, the other council members offered similar statements, some grudging, some genuine. Only Theron remained stiffly silent, his disapproval radiating like heat. Finally, Valor dismissed them. As they filed out, Lorcan paused beside me. "Miss Thorne," he said quietly, "you stood up to the most powerful wolves in the 7 territories without flinching. That takes courage. Or foolishness. I'm not sure which. Maybe both," I wrote. He laughed. "Perhaps. For what it's worth, I think the king needed someone like you. Someone who sees past the curse to the person underneath." He glanced at Valor. "Just be careful. Change is dangerous, and there are wolves who will fight it violently." Then he was gone, and it was just Valor, Calliope, and me in the vast throne room. Valor slumped in his throne, exhaustion written across his features. He wrote, "I'm sorry you had to endure that." "I've endured worse," I wrote. "At least your council was honest about their prejudice." My pack just smiled while thinking I should disappear. "Still, you shouldn't have to defend your worth to strangers. Neither should you. But we both did. And we both survived." I moved closer to the throne. "Valor, what Lorcan said, am I putting you in danger by staying? Is the council right that I'm disrupting something?" He looked at me for a long moment, then wrote, "You're disrupting everything. You're challenging the entire structure of how wolves understand leadership, strength, worth. You're living proof that the categories we've built are too narrow. And yes, that's dangerous. But Lunara." He stood, moving down from the throne to stand level with me. "It's also necessary. The world doesn't change by itself. It changes because someone stands up and says the old way isn't the only way. You did that today. Thank you." "I didn't do it for noble reasons," I wrote honestly. "I did it because I was angry. Because watching them dismiss you felt like watching my own pack dismiss me all over again. Then thank you for being angry. For letting that anger become action, instead of swallowing it like I've done for years." Calliope cleared her throat. "As much as I hate to interrupt this moment, you should both know, Theron is going to be a problem. He's gathering support among the more traditional territories. If you're serious about keeping Lunara here, about modeling a different kind of leadership, you need to be prepared for resistance." "What kind of resistance?" Valor wrote. "Political at first. Efforts to undermine your authority, to paint you as unstable or unfit. But if that doesn't work..." She trailed off meaningfully. "Violence," I wrote. "You think they might try violence? I think desperate people do desperate things. And Theron is very invested in maintaining the current power structure." Calliope looked at Valor seriously. "You need to decide, Your Majesty. Are you willing to fight for this? For the right to be different, to lead differently, to exist outside the narrow definitions they've created? Because if you are, it won't be easy. It won't be safe. And it will require more than just accepting yourself. It will require defending that acceptance against everyone who benefits from you staying silent." Valor was quiet for a long time, his expression cycling through doubt, fear, and finally, determination. He wrote, "I spent 7 years hiding. 7 years hoping someone would save me from myself. But Lunara showed me something yesterday. I don't need saving. I need acceptance. And if the council won't give me that, if they won't allow me to be who I actually am, then yes, I'll fight. I'll fight to prove that there are multiple ways to be strong, multiple ways to lead, multiple ways to exist as a wolf in this world. He looked at me. Will you fight with me? I'm not asking you to fix me or save me or break my curse. I'm asking if you'll stand beside me while I try to change a system that's broken both of us. While I try to create space for wolves like us. My hand shook as I wrote, yes, because you're right. The system is broken. And maybe we can't fix it. But we can refuse to let it define us. We can exist loudly despite our silence. We can be proof that different doesn't mean less. Together? He wrote. Together, I confirmed. And standing in that throne room, with the council's judgment still hanging in the air like smoke, two wolves who'd been told they were wrong made a choice. Not to be cured, not to be fixed, not to return to normal, but to be themselves as loudly and unapologetically as silence would allow. And to face whatever came next together. Chapter 7. The Garden of Forgotten Things. After the council's departure, Valor led me through the castle with visible relief, eager to escape the throne room's oppressive formality. We walked in companionable silence, the kind that felt natural rather than awkward, until we reached a door I hadn't noticed before, tucked behind a tapestry on the western side of the castle. Where are we going? I wrote. He smiled and wrote back. Somewhere the council has never been. Somewhere that's mine. The door opened onto a narrow staircase that spiraled upward. We climbed for what felt like ages, my legs burning with the effort, until finally we emerged onto a rooftop garden that stole my breath. It was wild. Completely, gorgeously wild. Flowers grew in chaotic profusion, roses tangled with ivy, lavender sprawled across cracked stone paths, flowering vines climbed the parapets. Trees grew from massive pots, their branches creating canopies of green. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were plants I'd never seen before, strange blooms in impossible colors, leaves that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, flowers that appeared to glow faintly even in daylight. What is this place? I wrote, turning in a slow circle. Valor's expression was soft, almost vulnerable. He wrote, my sanctuary. When being king becomes too heavy, when performing becomes unbearable, I come here. No one else knows about it except Calliope, and she only comes when I ask her to. I moved deeper into the garden, drawn by a flower that seemed to sing, not with sound, but with a vibration I could feel in my bones. When I touched it gently, the petals trembled and the vibration increased, almost like a purr. These are magical, I wrote, looking back at Valor with wonder. He nodded, joining me. I've been collecting them for years. Plants that communicate through means other than normal botanical signals. This one, he gestured to the singing flower, responds to touch and proximity. It's how it attracts pollinators in its native habitat. Not through scent or color, but through vibration. It's beautiful. It's different, he corrected. In its natural environment, it's considered inferior to flowers that bloom large and bright. But I think the vibration is more elegant than any visual display. I understood what he wasn't saying. That he collected broken things, different things the world overlooked because they didn't perform their function in standard ways. He led me to a bench positioned beneath a flowering tree whose blossoms fell like snow, surrounding us in a drift of white petals. We sat, and for a moment simply existed in the garden's peaceful chaos. Thank you for defending me to the council, he wrote eventually. You didn't have to do that. Could have stayed silent, let them think what they wanted. I couldn't watch them dismiss you, I wrote. Couldn't watch them treat your difference as weakness, when it's clearly just variation. Besides, I paused, considering my words carefully. I think I needed to defend you to defend myself. To prove that I believe what I said about silence not being a weakness. If I'd stayed quiet, I'd have been agreeing with them. You are magnificent, he wrote, and something in the way he formed the letters made heat rise to my cheeks. The way you called out their fear without cruelty. The way you named truth without flinching. I've never seen anyone face down the council like that. They're just wolves, I wrote. Powerful, yes. But still just wolves trying to protect what they have. Fear makes everyone petty. He smiled at that, then reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and touched my hand where it rested on the bench between us. Not holding it, just touching. Fingertips to knuckles, a connection point. "May I show you something?" He wrote with his other hand. "Something I've never shown anyone?" I nodded. He stood, keeping that light finger contact, and led me to the far corner of the garden where the plants grew thickest. There, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines, was a small greenhouse. Inside, the air was warm and humid, heavy with the scent of earth and growing things. But it was what grew there that made me stop, tears springing to my eyes without permission. Moonflowers. Hundreds of them, climbing every surface, their white blooms closed against the daylight, but still beautiful. Still achingly, impossibly beautiful. "These only bloom at night," Baylor wrote. "Under the full moon. They're supposed to respond to howls. They open wider, glow brighter when wolves sing to them. It's a traditional courtship flower. Alphas give them to potential mates, then howl to make them bloom. Proof of voice, of power, of ability to command even plants into responding." I touched one of the closed blooms gently, feeling the silky texture of petals that would never open for me. "Why do you grow them if you can't make them bloom?" "Because they're beautiful, even closed," he wrote. "Because their worth isn't determined by whether I can make them perform." Because he started again. Because I spent so long being told my worth was tied to my voice, to my ability to command, to dominate, to make things bend to my will. Growing these flowers is my way of saying that's not true. They're perfect as they are. And so am I. I stared at him, at this king who grew flowers that would never bloom for him because he wanted to prove a point to himself about worth and acceptance and beauty that didn't require performance. "You're remarkable," I wrote. "I'm broken," he corrected, but gently, without self-pity. "Just stating facts. Both can be true," I wrote. "You can be broken in some ways and remarkable in others. They're not mutually exclusive." He read this, and something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "Show me your moon," he wrote suddenly. "The one you paint in your journals. I saw the edge of a sketch in your room. Show me how you see her when you can't sing to her." I hesitated. My journal was private, personal, filled with thoughts and observations I'd never shared with anyone. But Baylor had just shown me his secret garden, his sanctuary. He'd shared his vulnerability. I could do the same. "Come with me," I wrote. We left the rooftop garden, though not before I touched the singing flower one more time, feeling its vibration settle into my chest like a second heartbeat, and returned to my room. My journal sat on the writing desk where I'd left it. I picked it up, flipped to a page from 2 months ago, and handed it to Baylor. The sketch showed the full moon, but not as she appeared in the sky. Instead, I'd drawn her as I imagined she'd look if sound had color. Waves of silver and blue and purple radiating from her surface, the songs of wolves made visible as light. Each howl a different shade, a different pattern, all of them together creating something breathtaking. Baylor stared at the drawing for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This is how you hear the pack song?" he wrote. "As for color and light, I had to find some way to experience it," I wrote, since I couldn't hear it normally. So I imagined what it might look like. Each wolf's voice has a different hue, all of them blending together into something larger than any individual contribution. "It's beautiful," he wrote. "More beautiful than the actual sound. You remember the sound?" His hand went to his throat, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as reflexive.
Barely.
7 years is long enough that memory fades. Sometimes I try to recall what my own voice sounded like, and can't. Like trying to remember a dream after waking. Does that frighten you? Sometimes. Other times it feels like freedom, like shedding a skin that never quite fits. I flipped to another page, this one showing a wolf, clearly meant to be me, standing at the edge of a pack circle. The other wolves had their mouths open, howling, their voices drawn as streamers of light flowing upward to the moon. But the central wolf stood silent, and instead of light flowing from her mouth, it flowed from her heart. A different color, a different pattern, but just as bright. This is how I imagine contributing, I wrote. Not through voice, but through presence. Through being so completely myself that it adds something to the whole, even if it's different from everyone else's contribution. Vaylor traced the drawing with one finger, following the light from the silent wolf's heart up to the moon. Then he set down the journal and wrote rapidly. Lunara, I need to tell you something. When you came here, when you passed the challenge by not needing to pass it, I felt something I haven't felt in 7 years. Not hope exactly. Something quieter but stronger. Like recognition. Like my soul saying, finally, someone who understands what it's like to be me. I felt it too, I wrote. In the mirror chamber. When you showed me your truth, and I didn't run. I'm not trying to court you, he wrote quickly. I'm not asking for romance or commitment or anything you're not ready to give. But I need you to know, having you here, being able to communicate honestly with someone who doesn't need me to be different, it's changing something fundamental in me. I'm starting to believe I'm not broken. Just different. And that maybe different is enough. My hand trembled as I wrote. You're teaching me the same thing. I came here thinking I was expendable. That my worth was tied to my ability to be useful despite my deficiency. But you keep treating me like my difference is valuable in itself. Like silence is its own form of communication rather than absence of communication. It's changing how I see myself. Good, he wrote. You deserve to see yourself clearly. You deserve to know that you're extraordinary exactly as you are. So do you. We sat there, in my borrowed room surrounded by books and afternoon light, two wolves who'd been told their entire lives that they were wrong, learning to believe something different. Finally, Vaylor stood. I should let you rest. The council meeting was draining, and I promised to show you more of the castle later. Tonight, if you're willing, I want to take you to the moonflower garden when they bloom. I want to show you that beauty doesn't require performance. I'd like that, I wrote. After he left, I sat with my journal, sketching rapidly while the encounter was fresh in my mind. The rooftop garden with its wild profusion of magical plants. The greenhouse full of flowers that bloomed for no one. Vaylor's expression as he read my drawings, tears shining in his eyes. And beneath it all, I wrote. I came here expecting to fail. Expected to be broken by whatever test the Silence King administered. Instead, I found someone who's teaching me that broken is just a word people use when you don't fit their mold. That silence is another way of speaking if you learn a language. That worth isn't determined by volume or performance or ability to conform. I don't know what I'm building here. Friendship? Partnership? Something without a name? But I know it matters. Feels important in ways I can't articulate. Like I've been searching my whole life without knowing what I was searching for, and suddenly I've found it in the most unexpected place. The Silence King isn't cursed. He's transformed. And maybe I am too. Maybe we both are. Hours later, after dinner was delivered to my room, after the sun had set and the full moon had risen, Calliope came to fetch me. He's waiting in the garden, she said, her expression knowing. Fair warning. The moonflowers are spectacular. And watching them bloom without howling to trigger it, it does something to you. Changes how you think about beauty and power and worth. Have you seen them?
Once.
Years ago, before the curse. Vaylor brought me up there during his engagement to Serenia, when he was already doubting everything. He wanted to show me something about how he felt, inadequate, performing, trying to make plants bloom through force when they'd bloom naturally if he just waited. What did you tell him? That waiting requires its own kind of strength. That patience is power in a different form. She smiled sadly. He didn't believe me then. Maybe he'll believe you now. Vaylor waited at the base of the rooftop stairs, holding a lantern that cast warm light across his features. He looked nervous, I realized. Actually nervous about showing me flowers. Ready? He wrote. I nodded, and we climbed together through the darkness, our shadows dancing on the stone walls. The rooftop garden was transformed at night. The magical plants glowed, some softly, others bright enough to read by. The air hummed with vibrations from flowers that sang their nighttime songs. And over it all, the full moon hung heavy and silver, painting everything in shades of pearl and shadow. Vaylor led me to the greenhouse. Through the glass walls, I could already see what was happening inside. The moonflowers were opening, Not all at once, but gradually, petal by petal, bloom by bloom, responding to the moonlight with a beauty that made my throat tight. They glowed as they opened, phosphorescent white with edges that seemed to shimmer between silver and blue. And they were silent. No howls triggered them. No commands opened them faster. They simply bloomed because it was night, because the moon was full, because that's what moonflowers do. Watch, Valor wrote, and pushed open the greenhouse door. The scent hit me immediately, sweet and complex, like honey and starlight, and something I had no words for. We stepped inside, surrounded by hundreds of blooming flowers, all of them glowing like captive moons. Valor moved to the center of the space, sat on a small bench I hadn't noticed earlier, and gestured for me to join him. I sat, and he handed me a piece of paper he'd written earlier. Traditional courtship says an alpha proves his worth by making these flowers bloom with his howl. The louder the voice, the brighter they glow. The more powerful the alpha, the more flowers respond. It's a test, a performance, proof of genetic fitness. But watch what happens when no one howls. I watched. The flowers continued blooming, continued glowing, their light growing steadily brighter without any vocal trigger. They responded to the moon herself, not to any wolf's voice. And their beauty, their pure, untouched, unmanipulated beauty, was more striking than any performance could have been. They don't need us to make them beautiful, Valor wrote. They're beautiful without us. Their worth isn't tied to our ability to command them. They exist in their own right, respond to their own rhythms, and bloom in their own time. Like you, I wrote. Like both of us. He nodded, then wrote, I spent years trying to make myself bloom on command. Trying to be the alpha everyone needed. Trying to perform power I didn't feel. And all it did was exhaust me. Make me hollow. Turn me into something that looked right from the outside, but felt wrong inside. The curse didn't break you, I wrote. It freed you from performing. Forced you to stop trying to make yourself bloom on command. But it also isolated me. Made me alone. Until he stopped writing, looked at me directly. His eyes reflected moonflower light, making them seem to glow from within. Until I finished for him on my board. Until someone who understands that silence is its own language. That difference doesn't mean less. That beauty doesn't require performance. He reached across the space between us, took my hand in his. Not romantic, not quite, but intimate,
Trusting.
the touch of someone who'd been alone so long that simple human connection felt revolutionary. We sat like that for hours, surrounded by moonflowers blooming in their own time, in their own way, proving that worth was inherent rather than performed. And somewhere in those silent hours, I realized something that should have terrified me, but instead felt like coming home. I was falling for the Silence King. Not because he was powerful or royal or cursed in interesting ways, but because he understood what it meant to be different. Because he collected broken things and showed them they were beautiful. Because he grew flowers that wouldn't bloom for him and loved them anyway. Because he was teaching me that maybe, just maybe, I'd been perfect all along. I just needed to stop trying to bloom on anyone's command but my own. Chapter 8. The Price of Difference. 3 weeks passed like water, through cupped hands, present and slipping away simultaneously. I fell into a rhythm at the castle that felt more natural than anything in my previous life. Mornings in the library with Valor, trading writings about philosophy and leadership. Afternoons helping Calliope with correspondence, learning the intricacies of governing 7 territories through diplomacy rather than dominance. Evenings in the rooftop garden, watching magical plants respond to the night in ways that had nothing to do with voice or command. I was happy. Genuinely, unexpectedly happy. Which should have been my first warning that something was about to shatter. It started small. Letters from the territories, delivered by Calliope with increasingly worried expressions. Requests for the king to appear publicly, to demonstrate his continued fitness to rule. Suggestions, thinly veiled demands, that he find a proper mate, produce an heir, secure the succession. They're getting bolder, Calliope said one morning, dropping another stack of correspondence on the library table where Valor and I sat. Theron is building a coalition. 3 territories now openly question your fitness to rule. They're calling for a competency hearing. That's not legal, I wrote. The king's position isn't subject to council approval. It is if he's deemed unable to fulfill his duties. And they're arguing that 7 years of silence constitutes inability. Calliope looked exhausted. They're framing it as concern for the kingdom, saying they need assurance that orders are actually coming from you and not being fabricated by advisors. Vaylor's hand clenched around his pen. He wrote, "This is about control, about forcing me to perform the way they want, about punishing me for not conforming." Yes, Calliope agreed. But knowing that doesn't change the political reality. They have power, and they're willing to use it. Your Majesty, you need to make a public appearance. Show the kingdom you're still capable of leading.
How?
I wrote. They'll just use it as evidence that he can't speak, can't command, can't fulfill traditional alpha duties. Then he needs to demonstrate leadership in non-traditional ways. Show them that silence doesn't equal incompetence. Calliope pulled out a proposal she'd clearly been working on. There's a territorial dispute in the eastern region. 2 packs fighting over hunting grounds, threatening to escalate into violence. Normally, this would be resolved through an alpha challenge. The strongest voice wins. But what if we resolved it differently? Through mediation, negotiation, written treaty. Vaylor read her proposal, then wrote, "And if I fail? If violence breaks out despite my attempts at peaceful resolution? Then Theron has his evidence that you're unfit. But if you succeed, if you prove that conflicts can be resolved without dominance displays, you undermine everything he's arguing." It's a trap, I wrote. Either way, they win. If Valor fails, he's incompetent. If he succeeds, they'll claim it was luck or that anyone could have done it. Probably true, Calliope admitted. But doing nothing is also a choice. And right now, inaction plays into Theron's narrative that you've given up, that you're hiding behind your curse instead of ruling through it. Vaylor was quiet for a long time, staring at the proposal. Finally, he wrote, "I'll do it. Not because I think it will change Theron's mind. Nothing will. But because those packs deserve better than to have their conflict used as a political weapon. They deserve a leader who actually tries to help." "I'm coming with you," I wrote immediately. "Lunara, it could be dangerous. Territorial disputes bring out the worst in wolves. If violence breaks out." "Then I'll be there anyway," I interrupted. "You think I'm safer here? If Theron's building a coalition, this castle isn't the sanctuary it used to be. Besides," I wrote faster, "you taught me that different wolves can lead differently. Let me prove it. Let me show that an Omega who can't howl can still contribute to conflict resolution." Vaylor studied me for a long moment, clearly torn between wanting my support and wanting to protect me. Finally, he wrote, "Only if you promise to stay safe. No heroics. No putting yourself in danger to defend me." "No promises," I wrote. "But I'll be careful." "That's not the same thing." "I know." We left 2 days later, traveling in a carriage with Calliope and 4 guards, fewer than a king should travel with, but Vaylor insisted. "I'm not going as a show of force. I'm going as a mediator. Taking an army would undermine that." The eastern region was 3 days' travel from the castle, through forests that grew denser and wilder the further we went. The disputed territory lay between the Silverpine Pack and the Thornwood Pack, a stretch of rich hunting grounds that both claimed based on historical precedent. "They've been skirmishing for 6 months, Calliope explained as we traveled. "Nothing major yet, mostly posturing, border violations, threatening displays. But 2 weeks ago, a young wolf from Silverpine was badly injured in a confrontation. Both packs are calling for blood now, demanding the right to resolve this through traditional challenge. Meaning the alphas fight, and the winner takes all, I wrote. Exactly. Which historically was effective, but brutal. The losing alpha either dies, or is so badly injured they can never lead again. Their pack becomes subordinate or fractures entirely. It's stability through domination. And Vaylor wants to offer them an alternative. He wants to show them that strength comes in forms other than violence. That true leadership means finding solutions that don't require bloodshed. Calliope looked out the window. The problem is, both alphas are young and proud. They've built their entire identity on being strong enough to fight for their pack. Asking them to negotiate instead will feel like weakness. Then we need to reframe what strength means, I wrote. Show them that walking away from a fight you could win is harder than walking into one. Valor, reading over my shoulder, nodded and wrote, Exactly. The question is whether they'll listen. We arrived at the disputed territory at sunset, the sky bleeding red and gold across the treeline. Both packs had sent delegations to meet us, 20 wolves each, all in human form but radiating barely contained aggression. The Silver Pine Alpha was a woman named Evania, tall and lean with silver blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. She assessed Valor with barely concealed disdain, her gaze lingering on his throat, where sound should come from but didn't. The Thornwood Alpha was a man called Darius, broader than Evania, with dark hair and the kind of presence that demanded attention. He looked at Valor with something closer to pity than respect. Neither acknowledged me at all. Calliope read Valor's greeting. Alpha Evania, Alpha Darius, thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm here to help you find a resolution to this territorial dispute that honors both packs without requiring violence. With respect, Your Majesty, Evania said, her tone suggesting no respect at all. This dispute has existed for generations. The only resolution is for one pack to prove dominance over the other. That's our way. That's how wolves have settled conflicts since the beginning. That's how some wolves have settled conflicts, Calliope corrected, reading Valor's response. But there are other ways. Ways that don't require bloodshed or subordination. Such as? Darius's voice was skeptical. Valor gestured to a clearing where tables and chairs had been set up. Talk. Negotiate. Find a compromise that serves both packs' needs. Evania laughed, sharp and cutting. Compromise is what the weak do when they can't win through strength. No offense, Your Majesty, but you've been cursed into silence for 7 years. Perhaps you've forgotten what it means to lead through power. I felt Valor stiffen beside me and saw his hands clench. Before I could think better of it, I stepped forward and held up my chalkboard. Alpha Evania, I'm Lunara Thorne. I can neither howl nor speak. By your definition, I'm weak. But I've survived 23 years in a pack that wanted me gone. I've learned 6 languages through reading since I couldn't learn them through hearing. I've taught dozens of young wolves to communicate through writing because they couldn't learn through standard pack methods. Am I weak? Or have I simply found different ways to be strong? Evania's eyes narrowed. Who are you to speak to me? I didn't speak. I wrote. There's a difference. I held her gaze. And I'm someone who understands that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the wisest one. The Omega makes a point, Darius said, surprising me. Though I question why the king brings a voiceless advisor to a negotiation about strength. Because strength comes in forms you're not recognizing, I wrote. Both of you are so focused on proving you're the strongest that you're ignoring what your packs actually need. You've been skirmishing for 6 months. How many wolves have been injured? How much energy have you diverted from hunting, from maintaining territory, from actually caring for your packs? That's... Evania started. Measurable, I interrupted. Calliope has the numbers. Want to see them? Calliope pulled out a report, reading, Silverpine Pack, 12 injuries requiring healer intervention, 30% decrease in successful hunts due to warriors being assigned to border patrol, 2 families requesting transfer to other territories because they feel unsafe. Thornwood Pack, 9 injuries, 40% decrease in hunts, 1 family already transferred out. The clearing went quiet. You're both losing, I wrote. Your packs are suffering because you're so busy proving who's strongest that you've forgotten what strength is supposed to protect. If either of you win through a traditional challenge, you'll have a pack that's been weakened by months of conflict. Is that leadership? Is that strength? Valor was watching me with something like awe, but I couldn't stop now. The king is offering you something different. A way to resolve this without further injury, without subordination, without bloodshed. Yes, it requires talking instead of fighting. But anyone can fight. It takes real strength to negotiate when every instinct is screaming for violence. Darius studied me for a long moment. You speak boldly for someone without a voice. I write boldly because I've learned that volume doesn't equal truth. That the quietest wolf in the room might see things others miss because they're too busy being loud. And what do you see, voiceless Omega? Ivania's tone was mocking. I see two alphas who care deeply about their packs, who is willing to fight to protect them. But I also see two alphas who've been told that fighting is the only way to show that care. And I see a king who's offering you permission to show it differently. Valor stepped forward, writing rapidly. The territory is 500 acres. What if we divided it, 250 acres for each pack? Or created a shared hunting ground with specific schedules? Or established a neutral zone that neither pack claims but both can access? There are solutions here that don't require anyone to submit or subordinate. Shared territory? Ivania looked appalled. That's not how packs work. It's not how packs have traditionally worked, Calliope corrected. But traditions can change, especially when they're causing more harm than good. And if we refuse? Darius asked. If we choose to resolve this through challenges, is it our right? Valor wrote. Then you have that right. I can't force you to negotiate. But I can tell you this. I've spent 7 years learning to lead without the ability to dominate through voice. And I've learned that true strength isn't about forcing others to submit. It's about finding solutions that let everyone maintain their dignity. Pretty words from a cursed king, Ivania said. But something in her voice had shifted. Less mocking, more uncertain. He's not wrong, Darius said slowly. My pack is suffering. We've lost good wolves to injuries that could have been avoided. And for what? For 500 acres that we'll probably overhunt anyway, because we'll be trying to prove we can maintain it alone. Ivania turned on him. You're actually considering this? Negotiation is a weakness. No. Darius met her eyes steadily. Refusing to negotiate when it's clearly the better option, that's weakness. That's pride getting in the way of what's best for my pack. Then you're a coward. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching my wolves suffer because I'm too proud to try something different. Valor wrote quickly, showing the text to both alphas. I propose this. Give me 3 days. 3 days to help you negotiate a solution. If at the end of 3 days you can't find common ground, you can proceed with a traditional challenge. But 3 days to try. What do you risk by talking? Ivania and Darius exchanged long looks, clearly communicating through the kind of visual language that alphas developed over years of leadership. Finally, Ivania said, 3 days. But if this fails, I reserve the right to challenge immediately. No more delays. Agreed, Darius said. Valor nodded, and I saw relief flood his features. You did it, I wrote to him as the alphas moved away to consult with their packs.
You convinced them to try.
He wrote back. We did it. You challenged their assumptions about strength. Made them question what they thought they knew. I just offered the framework. We make a good team, I wrote. His eyes met mine, warm and intense.
Yes.
We do. The 3 days that followed were exhausting. Hours of negotiation, of mapping territory, of finding compromises that neither alpha loved but both could live with. There were moments when I thought it would fall apart, when old grievances surfaced, when pride threatened to override practicality, when the cultural weight of how things have always been done nearly crushed any possibility of change. But Valor was patient, relentless. He wrote out proposal after proposal, finding creative solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable. And slowly, grudgingly, both alphas began to engage genuinely rather than defensively. By the end of the second day, they'd agreed to a shared hunting schedule and neutral buffer zone. By the end of the third day, they were actually laughing together over proposed boundary markers. You know, Darius said as we prepared to leave, when the council said the king was coming to mediate, I thought it was a joke. Thought we'd get some pompous alpha who'd show up, make threats, and leave. But you actually listened. Actually tried to understand what we needed. Valor wrote, that's what leadership should be. Understanding rather than commanding. Still seems like a weakness to me, Ivania admitted. But it's an effective weakness. My pack is safer now than they were 4 days ago. That's what matters. It's not a weakness, I wrote. It's a different kind of strength. the strength to set aside ego and find real solutions. The voiceless Omega has wisdom, Evania said, and for the first time, her tone held respect rather than mockery. Perhaps the council is wrong about you, Your Majesty. Perhaps silence makes you a better listener than the rest of us will ever be. We returned to the castle in triumph, Calliope already composing reports to send to all 7 territories detailing the successful negotiation. This undermines everything Theron was arguing, she said gleefully. Proves you can lead effectively despite the curse. Shows that different methods can work. But I noticed Vaylor's expression was troubled. What's wrong? I wrote as we entered the castle. You resolved the dispute. Proved that negotiation works. He pulled me aside into an empty corridor, writing rapidly. Lunara, you stood up to 2 territorial alphas. Challenged their assumptions, questioned their definition of strength. You made yourself a target. I was helping you. I know. And I'm grateful. But you need to understand. Theron won't see it as help. He'll see it as a voiceless Omega interfering in pack politics. He'll use it as ammunition, claim you're manipulating me, that you're the real danger to traditional pack structure. Let him, I wrote defiantly. If standing beside you makes me a target, I'll deal with that. I'm not going to hide just because some council alpha doesn't like change. You don't understand how dangerous he is. How far he'll go to maintain power. Then help me understand. What exactly are we up against? Vaylor looked at me for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he wrote, Theron didn't just oppose my reforms 7 years ago. He actively tried to sabotage them. Spread rumors that I was weak, that my gentleness was degrading the crown. When I announced my engagement to Serenia, he tried to break it, convinced her family I was unfit. When that failed, he stopped writing, hand shaking. He what? He suggested to my father, before he died, that I should be removed from succession, that the kingdom needed a real alpha. My father refused, but Theron never forgot that refusal. Never forgave me for inheriting despite his objections. So this isn't just about you being cursed. This is personal.
Yes.
And now you've made yourself part of that personal vendetta by defending me, by challenging traditional assumptions, by being living proof that wolves can be strong without volume. He cupped my face in his hands, an intimate gesture we'd fallen into over weeks of growing closeness. I couldn't bear it if he hurt you because of me. And I couldn't bear standing by while he undermines you, I wrote. Valor, we're in this together. Remember? You don't get to protect me by pushing me away. I'm not pushing you away. I'm trying to keep you safe. Same thing, I wrote. And I'm refusing both. We stand together or not at all. He stared at me, conflict written across his features. Then slowly he nodded. Together, he wrote. But carefully. Theron is dangerous when cornered. And right now, he's very cornered. We didn't know then how right he was. Didn't know that Theron had already set his next move in motion. Didn't know that our triumph in the eastern region would be the catalyst for everything that came next. We returned to the castle believing we'd won a victory. We didn't realize we'd just started a war. Chapter 9. The Serpent Strike. The attack came 3 nights after our return. I was in the library, my refuge, my sanctuary, reading a treatise on alternative pack structures by candlelight. Vaylor was in his chambers, dealing with correspondence that had accumulated during our absence. We'd fallen into the habit of spending evenings apart, giving each other space after days of constant proximity, then reconvening at midnight in the rooftop garden to share what we'd learned. It was a comfortable rhythm, a sustainable one. It made us predictable. I didn't hear them coming. Couldn't have, even if I'd had perfect hearing. They moved with the silence of trained assassins, of wolves who knew how to kill without sound. The first indication something was wrong was the candles. All of them, extinguishing simultaneously as if someone had sucked the air from the room. Darkness crashed over me like a wave, complete and disorienting. I reached for my chalkboard instinctively, knowing it was useless, but needing the familiar weight in my hands. Then I shifted, bones cracking, for sprouting, my body becoming wolf in the space between heartbeats. At least in wolf form, my other senses sharpened. I could smell them now. 3 wolves, no. 4, their scents unfamiliar and deliberately masked with herbs that confused my nose. I could feel the vibrations of their movement through the floor, circling me, cutting off exits. A voice spoke from the darkness, male and cold. The king's pet Omega. Theron sends his regards. I couldn't respond, couldn't howl for help, couldn't do anything except bare my teeth in a snarl they probably couldn't even see. He wants you to understand something, the voice continued. Closer now, circling. Your problem. An Omega who can't howl, interfering in pack politics, making the cursed king think he can lead differently. You're a symbol of everything that's wrong with his rule. Everything that needs to be corrected. I felt rather than seeing the first wolf lunge. I dodged left, felt claws rake across my shoulder. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. A warning strike. We're not here to kill you, the voice said.
Not yet.
We're here to deliver a message. Leave the castle.
Return to whatever pack will take you.
Stop encouraging the king's delusions about silence being strength. Another lunge, this time from my right. I twisted away, but wasn't fast enough. Teeth caught my hind leg, tearing. I went down hard, rolling to protect my throat. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll make you leave. And next time, we won't be gentle. I try to fight back, snapping at shadows, but fighting enemies you can't see is impossible. They knew it. They were toying with me, demonstrating my helplessness. Then light. Blazing, sudden, magical light that flooded the library like artificial sun. I saw my attackers clearly for the first time. 4 wolves, all in their animal forms, all wearing the colors of the Western Territory. Theron's territory. And standing in the doorway, hand outstretched and crackling with silver magic, was Calliope.
Get out.
Her voice was cold as winter. Or I'll do more than illuminate you. The lead wolf, a massive gray male, growled low. This doesn't concern you, advisor. Everything in this castle concerns me. And attacking a guest under the king's protection is an act of war. Calliope's magic intensified, the light growing painful. You have 3 seconds to leave before I show you exactly why Valor keeps a witch as his closest advisor. The wolves exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Then, as one, they bolted not toward the door but toward the windows. Glass shattered as they leaped through, disappearing into the night. Calliope was beside me instantly, her hands gentle as she examined my injuries. Shift back. Let me see the damage. I shifted, gasping at the pain. My shoulder was bleeding freely, and my leg, I couldn't put weight on it without agony shooting through my hip. Nothing fatal, Calliope said, already pulling bandages and salves from the ever-present bag at her hip. But they meant to scare you, hurt you just enough to make you afraid. She worked efficiently, cleaning wounds and applying pressure. This is Theron's doing. Direct intimidation when politics failed. I reached for my chalkboard with shaking hands. Valor already knows. I sent a mental pulse the moment I felt the words breach. He's coming. She finished bandaging my shoulder. Lunara, this changes everything. Theron has moved from political maneuvering to violence. That means he's desperate. And desperate alphas are the most dangerous kind. Will he attack Valor directly? Not likely. The king has protections, both magical and political, that make direct assault nearly impossible. But you? She met my eyes. You're vulnerable. You're the weakness Theron can exploit. The thing Valor cares about is that it isn't protected by centuries of safeguards. The door slammed open and Valor rushed in, his face a mask of fury and fear. He dropped to his knees beside me, hands hovering over my injuries as if afraid to touch and cause more pain. I'm okay, I wrote, though my hand shook badly enough that the letters were barely legible. They wanted to scare me, not kill me. His jaw clenched. He pulled out paper and wrote with violent force. This is my fault. I brought you here, made you a target, put you in danger because I was selfish and wanted company and... I grabbed his wrist, stopping the pen.
No.
Theron did this. Not you. He's the one who sent assassins because he can't handle change. I should have protected you better. Should have anticipated. You can't anticipate every threat, I interrupted. And I'm not some fragile thing that needs constant guarding. I knew the risks. I chose to stay anyway. Nearly dying isn't. I'm not nearly dead. I'm injured. There's a difference. I winced as I shifted position. Though I'll admit this hurts significantly. Valor looked at Calliope. How bad? The shoulder wound will heal in a week with proper care. The leg might take longer. The bite was deep. No permanent damage, but she'll need to stay off it for several days. Calliope stood, brushing off her trousers. More concerning is what this attack represents. Theron has declared open warfare. He'll try again. So we need to make me less of a target, I wrote. Announce publicly that I'm just a guest, not the king's advisor or companion. Create distance.
No.
Valor's written word was harsh, underlined 3 times. I'm not sacrificing you to make Theron comfortable. I'm not pretending it doesn't matter to protect you from his violence. Then what do you suggest? I can't fight off 4 assassins alone. Can't even call for help. We assign guards. We restrict your movements. He stopped, clearly hating every option. We make the castle a prison to keep you safe. That's not sustainable. I didn't escape being trapped in my pack just to be trapped here. Calliope cleared her throat. There is another option. One that neither of you will like. We both looked at her. Make Lunara's position official. Not as a guest, but as the king's formal companion. Under pack law, that grants her royal protections. Theron couldn't attack her without directly attacking the crown. What does formal companion mean exactly? I wrote. It's complicated. Not quite a mate bond, but more than friendship. Historically, it's how kings acknowledged significant relationships before formal mating. It gives Lunara legal standing, access to royal guards, and protection under the same laws that protect Valor. It also paints a target on her back, Valor wrote. Makes her even more symbolic of everything Theron opposes. A voiceless Omega as the king's companion? He'd see it as final proof that I've abandoned traditional values. I'm already a target, I wrote. At least this way, I'd be a protected target. There's more, Calliope said carefully. Formal companion status requires public acknowledgement. A ceremony before the council. Declarations of intent. It's not something that can be done quietly. I understood what she wasn't saying. It would force Valor to publicly claim me, to announce to all 7 territories that an Omega who couldn't howl mattered enough to receive royal protection. It would be revolutionary. It would be dangerous. It would change everything. Give us a moment, I wrote to Calliope. She nodded and slipped from the library, closing the door behind her. Valor and I sat in the wreckage of the room. Broken glass, overturned chairs, blood on the floor. My blood spilled because I dared to stand beside a king who led differently. You don't have to do this, I wrote carefully. I don't have to make a political statement with my life. We can find other ways to keep me safe. He wrote back immediately. This isn't about politics. It's about acknowledging what's already true, that you matter to me, that you've become essential. The thought of Theron hurting you makes me want to burn his entire territory to ash. That's definitely not your usual leadership through understanding philosophy. I'm allowed to have protective instincts, even if I express them differently than traditional alphas. Valor, I wrote seriously. If you make me your formal companion, there's no going back. The council will never accept it. Theron will escalate. Other territories might follow his lead. You could face open rebellion. I know. And you're willing to risk that? Risk the entire kingdom for one voiceless Omega? His eyes met mine, dark and intense and absolutely certain. He wrote, I spent 7 years being silent and alone because I was too afraid to be honest about who I am. Too afraid to challenge the system that demanded I perform alpha in ways that felt wrong. I won't make that mistake again. Won't hide what matters because acknowledging it is dangerous. He took my hand, ink-stained and shaking. You're not just any Omega. You're the wolf who saw me clearly and didn't run, who challenged 2 territorial alphas and won through logic rather than dominance, who stands in rooftop gardens with me and watches flowers bloom without needing them to perform. You're remarkable. And yes, you're worth risking everything for. Tears burned hot down my cheeks. I'm not worth a war. You're worth whatever it costs to protect you. To honor what we're building. To show the 7 territories that there are other ways to be, other ways to lead, other ways to love. Love? I wrote, the chalk nearly snapping. He nodded slowly, then wrote with careful precision, I love you, Lunara Thorne. Not in spite of your silence, but including it. Not despite your difference, but celebrating it. I love you the way moonflowers bloom. Naturally, inevitably, without needing permission or command. And I won't hide that to make the council comfortable. I stared at the words, at this impossible declaration from a king who'd learned to speak volumes through silence. I love you too, I wrote finally. Even though it's terrifying. Even though we're probably going to cause a political crisis. Even though we're both broken in ways that make this complicated. Broken is just another word for humans, he wrote. Or wolf. Or whatever we are when we're being honest. So we do this? Make it official? Face whatever comes together? He nodded, then wrote. Together. Always. Calliope returned an hour later to find us still sitting together, my head resting on Valor's shoulder despite the pain in my leg, his arm wrapped carefully around my uninjured side. I take it you've decided? She asked. Valor showed her what he'd written. Summon the council. We'll hold the ceremony in 3 days. Give them time to arrive, but not enough time to organize significant resistance. They're going to lose their minds, Calliope said, but she was smiling. Theron especially. This is everything he feared. You choosing love over tradition, personal connection over political advantage, an omega over a proper alpha mate. Good, I wrote. Let him be afraid. Let all of them be afraid. Change is coming whether they want it or not. The ceremony itself is simple, Calliope explained. You'll both make declarations before the council. Speak your intentions, acknowledge the bond publicly. Then I'll perform the formal recognition. It's more of a legal contract than a magical ritual. Once it's done, Lunara will have full royal protections and standing. Will the council try to block it? They can try. But ultimately, the king's choice of companion is his own. They can disapprove, they can protest, but they can't legally prevent it. She pulled out a thick book of protocol. There are vows to prepare. Words to be exchanged. Valor, you'll need to write yours in advance, since you can't speak them aloud. And Lunara? Valor wrote. She'll write hers as well. We'll have them read aloud by a neutral party, traditionally the royal advisor. Calliope looked at me. This is your last chance to back out. Once we announce this, there's no pretending it didn't happen. You'll be permanently tied to Valor's political fate. If he falls, you fall with him. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't fall, I wrote. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Word spread quickly. The cursed king was taking a formal companion, and she was a voiceless omega from a pack that had disowned her. The council began arriving, their disapproval radiating like heat. Theron came last, his expression carved from ice, his presence filling the castle with barely contained rage. Your Majesty, he said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. I must protest this unprecedented action. A formal companion is traditionally an alpha or high-status beta. Choosing an omega, especially one so afflicted, sends the wrong message about the crown's values. Valor wrote, the only message it sends is that worth isn't determined by voice or rank. That connection matters more than tradition. If the council can't accept that, perhaps the council needs new members. Theron's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. One that will cost you everything. He's already lost everything that matters under your definition of leadership, I wrote, standing beside Valor despite the lingering pain in my leg. Maybe it's time for new definitions. The voiceless omega speaks, Theron sneered. How fitting. The cursed king and his broken companion, leading the 7 territories into ruin through weakness. We'll see who's weak, I wrote. We'll see who's still standing when this is over. The ceremony was set for the following evening, under the full moon. All 7 council alphas would attend, along with their delegations. It would be witnessed by hundreds of wolves, recorded in official histories, impossible to undo or deny. The night before, I sat in the rooftop garden with Valor, surrounded by glowing plants and moonflower blooms. "Are you sure?" I wrote for the 100th time. "It's not too late to change your mind." He took my hand, turned it over, and wrote on my palm with his finger, a gesture we'd developed over weeks of growing intimacy. Never been more certain of anything. I traced my own message on his palm. "I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow. I love you too. Whatever comes." We sat in the garden until dawn, two wolves who couldn't howl, preparing to announce to the world that silence was its own form of strength. That love didn't require sound. Those broken pieces could build something beautiful. Tomorrow, we would stand before the council and make official what our hearts had already claimed. Tomorrow, we would face Theron's fury and the council's disapproval and the weight of tradition that said we shouldn't exist. Tomorrow, everything will change. But tonight, we had each other. And somehow that was enough. Chapter 10: The Ceremony of Silence. The Great Hall had never looked more beautiful or more threatening. White flowers, not moonflowers, but winter roses that bloomed in the cold, cascaded from the ceiling, woven through with silver ribbons that caught the candlelight. The 7 territories' banners hung from the walls, each representing the alphas who'd come to witness. Or judge. Or both. I stood in a preparation chamber off the main hall, staring at myself in a mirror that seemed determined to show me every flaw. Calliope had dressed me in formal attire, a gown of deep midnight blue that somehow made my skin glow rather than wash out, with silver embroidery at the collar and cuffs that matched the ribbons in the hall. My hair was braided with small white flowers, and someone had painted my lips the color of winter berries. I looked like someone who belonged at a royal ceremony. I felt like an imposter wearing someone else's skin. "You're beautiful," Calliope wrote on a piece of paper, handing it to me. "And more importantly, you're brave." What are doing today? Standing beside Valor publicly, claiming this bond despite knowing how dangerous it is. That's extraordinary. "It's terrifying," I wrote back. Those aren't mutually exclusive. A knock at the door. Calliope opened it to reveal a young wolf I didn't recognize, one of the palace guards, her expression carefully neutral. "The council is assembled," she said. "Alpha Theron has requested to speak before the ceremony begins. King Valor asks if Miss Thorne is ready." "Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes," I wrote, showing the guard my board. After she left, I turned to Calliope. "Theron requesting to speak first can't be good."
No.
"But we anticipated this. He'll try to sway opinion, make one last argument against the ceremony. Valor has prepared a response. Will it be enough?" Calliope's expression was grim. "Honestly, I don't know. Theron has been building support for weeks. 3 territories openly oppose this union. 2 are undecided. Only the southern and eastern territories have expressed support, and even that's lukewarm. So we're walking into a hostile room. You're walking into a divided room, which means there's still a chance to sway the undecided. If you and Valor can demonstrate that this bond is genuine, that it strengthens rather than weakens the crown, you might win enough support to survive. And if we can't, then Theron will have the political ammunition he needs to call for a vote of no confidence, to argue that Valor is unfit to rule." She touched my shoulder gently. "But Lunara, listen to me. Even if the worst happens, even if Theron wins politically, you and Valor will still have each other. That's not nothing. That's everything." I nodded, straightening my spine. "Let's get this over with." The great hall fell silent as I entered. Hundreds of eyes tracked my movement, assessing, judging, finding me wanting or worthy in equal measure. I kept my head high, my expression calm, even as my heart hammered against my ribs hard enough to hurt. Valor waited at the front of the hall, standing before a raised platform where the council sat in a semicircle. He wore formal black with silver threading, the crown I'd never seen him wear before sitting heavy on his head. He looked every inch the king. But when his eyes found mine, they softened. Became the Valor I knew, gentle, uncertain, brave in ways that had nothing to do with dominance. I crossed the long expanse of hall, my injured leg protesting with each step, but holding. When I reached him, he offered his hand. I took it, our fingers interlacing in a gesture that was both comfort and declaration. Together, I traced his palm. Always he traced back. Theron stood from the council's semicircle, his expression carved from stone and malice. Before we begin this ceremony, I wish to address the assembly, to voice concerns that many share but fear to speak aloud. Valor gestured for him to continue, his jaw tight. Your Majesty, Theron's voice carried through the hall with practiced ease. For 7 years, we have watched you struggle under your curse. We have been patient. We have hoped for your recovery, for the breaking of the enchantment that stole your voice. We have maintained faith that you would return to being the leader this kingdom needs. He paused, letting the words settle. But instead of working to break your curse, you have embraced it. Instead of seeking a mate who could restore you to proper alpha function, you have chosen. His gaze swept over me with undisguised contempt. A voiceless omega. A wolf who cannot howl, cannot speak, cannot fulfill even the most basic omega functions. Together, you represent everything our society is built to prevent. Weakness breeding with weakness. Silence compounding silence. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Some nodding agreement, others uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge Theron's words. This is not about prejudice, Theron continued. This is about survival. About maintaining the strength that has kept our species thriving for millennia. Alphas lead through power. Omegas support through traditional roles. Betas provide stability through their middle ground nature. These categories exist for a reason. They are not arbitrary, they are fundamental to who we are. He turned to address Valor directly. Your Majesty, I do not question your right to choose a companion. But I question your judgment in choosing one who reinforces your weakness rather than compensating for it. Who makes you comfortable in your curse rather than challenging you to overcome it. Who? Enough. I wrote the word large enough for the entire front row to see, then held up my board. With respect, Council Alpha Theron, you don't know what you're talking about. The hall went absolutely silent. Theron's eyes narrowed. You dare interrupt. I dare speak the truth, I wrote. Since you seem confused about what strength actually means. You say valor, and I represent weakness breeding with weakness. I say we represent two different forms of strength learning to complement each other. Calliope stepped forward, reading my words aloud so the entire hall could hear. You say we're comfortable in our curses. I say we've learned to exist despite them. To find value and purpose and power in ways that don't require sound. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. That's survival. That's the very thing you claim to value about our species. Pretty words, Theron sneered. But what can you actually offer the crown? What strength do you bring besides the ability to write eloquent defenses of your inadequacy? I bring perspective, I wrote. I bring the understanding of what it means to exist on the margins. I bring patience and observation and the ability to hear what isn't being said, skills you might value if you stop talking long enough to listen. Valor stepped forward, showing the paper he'd prepared. Lunara has been at my side for weeks now. She helped negotiate a territorial dispute that could have turned violent. She challenged 2 alphas who were determined to resolve their conflict through bloodshed and convinced them to try negotiation instead. She succeeded where traditional approaches would have failed, precisely because she doesn't rely on dominance or volume. Calliope read his words with clear, strong emphasis on each point. She has taught me that leadership doesn't require the loudest howl. That strength comes in forms we've been trained not to recognize. That being different isn't the same as being deficient. And if this council cannot see her value, cannot recognize that she makes me a better leader rather than a worse one, then perhaps this council needs to examine its own limitations. Murmurs grew louder. Some angry, some thoughtful. Alpha Lorcan stood, the kind-eyed wolf from the Southern Territory who'd shown respect during our first council meeting. Your Majesty, I don't question Miss Thorne's character or capability. But I must ask, what happens to the succession? To the kingdom's future? A king must produce heirs. A companion relationship without the possibility of offspring leaves us vulnerable. It was the question I'd been dreading. The one truth I couldn't write around or reframe or defend against. Vaylor's hand tightened around mine. He wrote, "Lunara is barren. We discovered this early in our acquaintance. Yes, it means we cannot produce biological heirs. But it doesn't mean the kingdom is without succession options." Such as? Theron pounced on the admission like a predator scenting blood. Adoption. Mentorship. Training a successor based on merit rather than genetics. There are precedents. Weak precedents, Theron interrupted. Exceptions made in extraordinary circumstances. But, Your Majesty, you're not in extraordinary circumstances. You're perfectly capable of choosing a fertile mate, of producing blood heirs, of securing the succession in traditional ways. Choosing not to, choosing this barren omega over the kingdom's future. That's not strength. That's selfishness. The words hit like physical blows. I felt Vaylor stiffen beside me, felt his rage radiating through our joined hands. But I also felt something else. A strange calm settled over me. Because Theron had just revealed his true fear. Not that we were weak, but that we were choosing love over duty. Choosing personal happiness over political advantage. And he was right to be afraid. Counsel Alpha Theron, I wrote, my hand steady despite everything. You keep using the word traditional like it's synonymous with correct. But traditions are just habits that have lasted long enough for people to forget they were once new. Once revolutionary. Once considered dangerous. Yes, Vaylor, and I cannot produce biological heirs. Yes, our bond doesn't fit standard pack structures. Yes, we represent change that makes you uncomfortable. But what you call selfishness, I call choosing authenticity over performance. Choosing genuine connection over political calculation. Choosing to build something new rather than maintaining something broken. Vaylor added his own writing. The question this council must answer isn't whether Lunara and I fit traditional molds. It's whether you're willing to accept that wolves can exist outside those molds and still have value. Still have strength. Still have the right to love and be loved without apologizing for their differences. Theron's face darkened. You're asking us to fundamentally restructure our entire society. To throw away millennia of successful organization because two cursed wolves want to feel better about their inadequacies. No, Calliope said, her voice ringing through the hall. He's asking you to acknowledge that your successful organization has left countless wolves feeling broken and worthless simply because they don't fit narrow categories. He's asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, there are better ways to measure worth than volume and fertility and adherence to rigid roles. Alpha Yvain of the Northern Territory stood. This is madness. We cannot run a kingdom on feelings and philosophical debates about the nature of strength. We need stability. We need tradition. We need honesty, Alpha Ivania interrupted, rising from her seat. The Silverpine Alpha, who'd questioned our mediation, now looked at us with something like respect. I opposed this union when I first heard of it. Though it was a weakness, I thought it would destabilize everything. But I watched Miss Thorne negotiate with Alpha Darius and me. I watched her challenge our assumptions without cruelty. Watch her find solutions we'd been too proud to see. She looked directly at Theron. You say they represent weakness. I say they represent adaptation. And in a changing world, the ability to adapt might be more valuable than the ability to maintain traditions that no longer serve us. The Silverpine Pack supports this union, Ivania declared, and recognizes Miss Thorne's formal companion status. Alpha Darius stood next. The Thornwood Pack also supports it, for what it's worth. Lorcan nodded slowly. The Southern Territory. I have concerns about succession, but I cannot deny that this bond appears genuine. That these two wolves have found something rare, understanding despite difference. The Southern Territory will not oppose the ceremony. 3 territories in support. 2 neutral. 2, Theron's Western Territory and Yvain's Northern Territory, clearly opposed. It wasn't a majority, but it wasn't a complete rejection either. Theron's expression was murderous. This isn't over. A formal companion status requires only that the king declare it. But the council retains the right to call for competency reviews, to question whether a king who prioritizes personal feelings over kingdom welfare should continue ruling. Are you threatening to call for my removal? Valor wrote, I'm warning you that choices have consequences, that leading through weakness has limits, that eventually the kingdom will demand a real alpha. And when that day comes, Theron's gaze swept over me, cold and final. Your little companion won't be able to write your way out of it. Then I'll deal with that when it comes, Valor wrote. But today, I'm claiming Lunara Thorne as my formal companion. Today, I'm announcing to all 7 territories that she has my protection, my respect, and my love. And anyone who wishes to challenge that can answer me directly. The threat hung in the air, not violent, but unmistakable. The cursed king defended his choice with everything he had left. Calliope stepped forward, holding the formal documentation. By the authority vested in me as royal advisor, and in the presence of the assembled council, I now perform the ceremony of formal companion recognition. She gestured for us to face each other. King Valor, do you willingly claim Lunara Thorne as your formal companion? Do you offer her your protection, your respect, and your commitment to stand beside her regardless of outside pressure? Valor held up his prepared vows. I do. Lunara has taught me that silence is its own form of communication. That strength doesn't require volume. That being broken in some ways can make you whole in others. She has shown me patience when I deserved judgment, understanding when I deserved rejection, love when I deserved abandonment. I claim her not because she completes me, but because she sees me completely and chooses to stay anyway. I offer her everything I am, cursed, silent, different, and trust that it's enough. Tears blur my vision as Calliope read his words aloud. Lunara Thorne, do you willingly accept King Valor as your formal companion? Do you offer him your trust, your honesty, and your commitment to stand beside him regardless of outside pressure? I held up my own prepared statement, and Calliope read, I do. Valor has taught me that worth isn't determined by voice or power or ability to conform. That difference can be beautiful. That silence speaks volumes if you learn to listen. He has given me sanctuary when I had none, purpose when I felt useless, love when I thought myself unlovable. I accept him not despite his curse, but including it. Not despite his difference, but celebrating it. I offer him everything I am, voiceless, barren, broken, and trust that together, we're more than the sum of our inadequacies. Calliope's voice wavered slightly as she finished reading. Then she pulled out the formal contract, a binding magical document that would tie us legally, politically, permanently. Then, by the power vested in me and witnessed by the Council of 7 territories, I declare this bond recognized. Lunara Thorne, you are hereby granted formal companion status, with all rights and protections therein. She placed the document between our joined hands. Magic sparked, silver and warm, settling over us like a blanket. Not a mate bond, not the mystical soul connection that true mates shared, but something real nonetheless. Something chosen rather than destined. Something of ours. The hall erupted. Some wolves cheering, others protesting, most simply talking in heated voices about what this meant, what it changed, what it threatened or promised. But I only saw Valor. Only felt his hands cupping my face. Only experienced the moment when he leaned forward and kissed me, gentle, reverent, full of everything words could never convey. When we pulled apart, I traced on his palm. We did it. He traced back. We survived. Now what? His smile was beautiful and sad and determined. Now we figure out how to actually lead through this. How to prove that differences can work. How to build a kingdom that has space for wolves like us. No pressure, I traced. None at all, he agreed. Theron was already leaving, his delegation following, his expression promising that this battle was far from over. But for now, in this moment, Valor and I had each other. Had made our bond official despite every reason not to. Had chosen love over safety, authenticity over performance, each other over everything else. And somehow, standing in that great hall with flowers falling like snow and magic settling warm over our joined hands, it felt like enough. Chapter 11. The Weight of a Crown. The celebration after the ceremony was subdued. Those who supported us, Evania, Darius, Lorcan, and their delegations, offered congratulations that felt genuine but cautious, as if they'd signed onto something whose full consequences hadn't yet revealed themselves. Those who opposed us left immediately, Theron at their head like a general retreating to regroup. And Valor and I stood at the center of it all, officially bound now, feeling the weight of what we'd just done settle over us like stone. "We should appear at the feast," Calliope wrote, handing me the note discreetly. "Show unity. Demonstrate that this bond strengthens rather than weakens you. Politics aside, the optics matter." I showed the note to Valor. He nodded wearily, then wrote, "How long?" 2 hours minimum. Long enough to make an impression, not so long that you're obviously forcing it. 2 hours of performing strength while my leg throbs and my head spins with everything that just happened, I wrote. "Wonderful." Valor touched my hand, traced. "We can do anything for 2 hours. Together." "Your optimism is exhausting," I traced back, but I was smiling. The feast was held in the castle's main dining hall, long tables laden with more food than 100 wolves could eat. Music played, not songs with lyrics, but instrumental pieces that filled the space without requiring voice. A small consideration for the voiceless king and his silent companion, but one I noticed and appreciated. We sat at the high table, Valor on his throne with me beside him on a chair that had been added and elevated to match his height. A visible symbol. We were equals in this bond, regardless of our different ranks. Alpha Evania approached first, wine glass in hand. "Your Majesty, Miss Thorne. I wanted to say what you did today took courage. Real courage, not the performative kind we usually celebrate." "Thank you," I wrote. "Your support meant more than you know." "Don't thank me yet. Theron's going to make your lives extremely difficult. He's already sent messages to every territory calling for an emergency council session in 3 months. He's going to push for a competency review." Valor wrote, "Let him. I've been leading effectively despite the curse. The territories are stable, conflicts are being resolved peacefully. What grounds does he have? He'll argue that choosing personal happiness over political strategy demonstrates unsound judgment. That refusing to seek a cure for your curse shows lack of commitment to traditional leadership. That taking a barren companion when you could produce heirs is abandoning your duty." Evania's expression was sympathetic. "I don't agree with any of it. But politically, he has arguments that will resonate with traditional wolves." "So what do we do?" I wrote. "You prove him wrong. You lead so effectively over the next 3 months that even Theron's supporters can't deny your competency. You show the territories that different doesn't mean worse, just different." She raised her glass. "And you don't let him make you doubt yourselves. That's what he wants. To erode your confidence until you start believing his narrative." After she left, Alpha Darius took her place. "Practical advice. Strengthen your alliances. The Eastern and Southern territories support you, but that support needs to be reinforced. Visit them, help them with their regional issues, make yourselves indispensable." Valor nodded, writing, "What about the undecided territories? Central and coastal? They're waiting to see which way the wind blows. If you can show strong leadership over the next 3 months, they'll likely support you in any competency review. If you stumble, they'll side with Theron to protect themselves." Darius leaned forward. "The Thornwood pack is with you. But, Your Majesty, being right isn't enough. You need to be strategically right, visibly right, undeniably right." "No pressure," I wrote again. Darius grinned.
Exactly.
Welcome to politics. The 2 hours stretched into 3 before we could finally escape. My leg was screaming, my head pounded from concentration, and Valor looked as exhausted as I felt. We retreated to his private chambers, not the formal receiving rooms, but the actual bedroom where he slept, where vulnerability was allowed. I collapsed onto a chair while Valor pulled off his crown with visible relief, setting it on a table like it weighed more than gold and silver. "That was exhausting," I wrote. Worth it though, he wrote back. We made our statement. Show them we're united. Valor. I wrote his name carefully. Are you sure about this?
About me?
3 months until Theron's review. 3 months of constant scrutiny. And I'm. He crossed me quickly, kneeling so we were eye level. Wrote. You're what? About to say you're not worth the trouble? That I should have chosen someone easier? Someone who could actually help you politically. Someone whose presence doesn't make everything harder. Lunara. He took both my hands. You make things harder because you force everyone to question assumptions they've held for generations. That's not weakness. That's revolution. Yes, the next 3 months will be difficult. Yes, Theron will do everything in his power to undermine us. But I meant what I said in those vows. I choose you. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Even if it costs you the crown? He was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his answer carefully. Then he wrote, I spent 7 years being a king without being myself, performing leadership while hiding who I really was. It was empty, hollow. I was dying inside long before the curse made it physical. These past months with you, learning to lead authentically, learning to be honest about my differences, I felt more alive than in all those years of performing. He showed me the paper with intensity in his eyes. So yes, even if it costs me the crown. Because what good is power if I have to deny myself to hold it? What's the point of ruling if I'm not actually living? Tears tracked down my cheeks. You're going to make me cry at our own celebration. Our very small, very exhausting celebration, he agreed, smiling. A knock at the door. Calliope entered, looking grim. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Well, another problem.
What now?
I wrote. Message from Riverside Pack. Your pack, Lunara. Your father. My blood went cold.
What does he want?
Calliope handed me a letter, sealed with my father's mark. I broke it open with shaking hands. Lunara, word has reached me of your elevation. Formal companion to the cursed king. I must admit surprise. When you left, I assumed you'd fail the challenge and return quietly. Instead, you've managed to secure a position far above what any of us anticipated. I write not to congratulate you, but to remind you of certain realities. You are still legally a member of Riverside Pack, though disowned. Your new status reflects on us, whether we wish it or not. As such, I expect certain considerations. Financial support for the pack that raised you. Political favor when disputes arise. Recognition that your success stems from the foundation we provided. Failure to provide such considerations would be unfortunate. It would suggest you've forgotten your origins, forgotten the pack that gave you life even if they couldn't give you worth. I trust you'll make the wise choice. Your father, Alpha Fenric Thorne. I read it twice, feeling old wounds tear open. Then I passed it to Valor, watching his expression darken with each line. He's blackmailing me, I wrote, threatening to publicly claim I'm ungrateful, that I've abandoned my pack, that I owe them for my existence. Worse than that, Calliope said. He's positioning himself to either profit from your success or undermine you if you refuse. Either way, he wins. If you give him what he wants, he gets resources and favors. If you refuse, he goes to the council claiming you're selfish, that you've elevated yourself while abandoning your birth pack. Valor wrote furiously, This is extortion. Lunara owes him nothing. He disowned her, called her expendable, sent her here expecting her to fail. He doesn't get to claim credit for her success now. But politically, he has a point, I wrote, hating every word. I am from Riverside Pack. My elevation does reflect on them. And refusing to acknowledge that gives Theron more ammunition. Look, the king's companion abandons her own pack. What loyalty can she offer the crown? So, what do you want to do? Calliope asked. I thought about my father's letter, about years of being told I was worthless, about being sent to the castle as a sacrifice. Thought about standing in that throne room while he calculated my value as a political tool. I want to tell him to burn in hell, I wrote honestly. But that's not strategic. Valor wrote, Then don't. Strategy isn't the only thing that matters. Sometimes standing up to people who've hurt you matters more. You say that now, but I always say that. Lunara, your father treated you as disposable your entire life. He sent you here expecting you to fail and die trying. He doesn't get to suddenly claim paternal rights now that you've succeeded. You don't owe him anything. The council will see it differently. Some will. Others will see a woman refusing to be manipulated by someone who abused her. Others will respect you for having boundaries. He cupped my face gently. You taught me that being authentic matters more than being palatable. Let me teach you the same thing. Don't give your father power over you just because politically it would be easier. I looked at Calliope. What do you think? I think the king is right. I also think we can frame this strategically if we're careful. You're not refusing to acknowledge Riverside Pack. You're setting boundaries with an alpha who treated you poorly. There's a difference. She pulled out paper. We draft a response. Polite but firm. You acknowledge your origins, but make clear that you owe nothing to a pack that disowned you. You offer standard diplomatic relations, no special favors, no financial support beyond what any pack receives. Take away his leverage by refusing to play his game. And when he goes to the council claiming I'm ungrateful, then we provide context. Share what your childhood was like. Let the territories see that this isn't a daughter abandoning her pack. It's a survivor refusing to reward her abuser. Calliope's expression was fierce. Lunara, you're not the scared Omega he sent away anymore. You're the king's formal companion. You have power now. Use it. We spent the next hour drafting a response. Valor contributed suggestions, Calliope refined the language, and I poured years of suppressed anger into carefully diplomatic words. Alpha Fenric, I acknowledge receipt of your letter and your expectations. However, I must clarify certain misconceptions. You disowned me years ago, declaring me worthless to Riverside Pack. You sent me to the Silence King's challenge expecting me to fail, using me as a political sacrifice to clear your debts. You made clear through word and action that I was expendable, that my existence was a burden you tolerated rather than valued. Now that I have found success despite your rejection, you wish to claim credit and demand compensation. I decline. I owe Riverside Pack nothing beyond standard diplomatic courtesy extended to all territories. I will not provide special financial support. I will not offer political favoritism. I will not pretend that my elevation is somehow connected to foundations you provided, when the only foundation you gave me was the understanding that I would have to build my own worth from nothing. You taught me I was worthless. You were wrong. But I learned the lesson anyway, that my value comes from within, not from pack acceptance or paternal approval. Consider this letter closure. You will receive no further communication unless official diplomatic matters require it. Lunara Thorne, formal companion to King Valor. I read it over 3 times, my hand shaking. This will make him furious. Good, Valor wrote. Let him be furious. Let him know that disowning you has consequences. That he can't hurt you for years and then demand gratitude. What if the council sees this as proof I'm vindictive? Cold? Unfit for my position? Calliope leaned forward. Then you explain what he did. Share your story. Let them see that this isn't vindictiveness, it's justice. Lunara, you're not the only wolf who's been mistreated by their pack. Others will see themselves in your story. Others will respect you for refusing to be manipulated. And if they don't, Valor wrote, if they condemn you for this, then we deal with it together. But you don't compromise your healing to make them comfortable. Understood? I nodded slowly, then signed the letter with a hand that had stopped shaking. Send it. Before I lose my nerve. Calliope took the letter, sealed it with my new formal companion seal. I'll have it delivered tomorrow. Fenric should receive it within 3 days. After she left, I sagged against Valor, exhausted beyond words. This is only the first challenge, I wrote. There will be more. From Theron, from my father, from every wolf who sees us as threats to their worldview. I know, he wrote. But Lunara, look at what we've accomplished already. You passed a challenge designed to break people. You negotiated peace between warring packs. You stood before the council and defended us both with nothing but words on a chalkboard. You're stronger than you think. I'm terrified.
So am I.
But we're terrified together. That has to count for something. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind we'd learned to speak fluently, until exhaustion pulled us toward sleep. Valor led me to his bed, and for the first time, we lay down together not as king and guest, but as formal companions, bonded by magic and choice and stubborn refusal to let the world tell us we were wrong. Tomorrow starts the real challenge, I traced on his palm in the darkness, proving we can actually lead, actually make this work. Tomorrow he traced back. But tonight we rest. We celebrate surviving today. We remember that choosing each other was the right decision, regardless of what comes next. I fell asleep wrapped in his warmth, in the safety of his presence, in the knowledge that whatever battles lay ahead, I wouldn't face them alone. Outside, in the territories we'd now have to prove ourselves to, wolves whispered about the cursed king and his voiceless companion, about whether love could really be strength, about whether differences could truly lead. We had 3 months to show them it could. 3 months to revolutionize everything they thought they knew about power and worth and leadership. 3 months to prove that silent wolves could speak the loudest truth of all, that being yourself, completely and honestly, was the most radical act of all. And as I drifted into sleep, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. Not because we were perfect, but because we were perfectly, honestly, beautifully ourselves. And that was a revolution worth fighting for. Chapter 12. The Eastern Alliance. The response from my father arrived faster than expected, only 2 days after we'd sent my letter. Calliope brought it to the library where Valor and I were reviewing proposals for the upcoming territorial visits. "It's brief," she said, handing me the envelope. I opened it with steady hands this time, refusing to let my father's words shake me. "Lunara, you've made your position clear.
So be it.
But understand, when you fall, and you'll fall because wolves like you always do, don't come crawling back to Riverside Pack seeking refuge. You've severed ties that cannot be rebuilt. You think you're strong because you've gained a title. But titles don't change what you are, a voiceless mistake who got lucky. When that luck runs out, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you chose pride over family."
Goodbye.
Fenric. Not father anymore. Not even Alpha Fenric Thorne. Just Fenric, his final rejection dressed as finality.
I should have felt something.
Grief, maybe, for the relationship that had never existed. Relief that it was finally, truly over. Something. Instead, I felt nothing. Or perhaps not nothing, but clarity. Cold, clean clarity. "He was never my family," I wrote, showing the letter to Valor. "Family doesn't treat you as expendable and then demands gratitude. This is the closure I should have sought years ago." Valor read it, his jaw tight. Then he wrote, "Are you okay?" Surprisingly, yes. He can't hurt me anymore. Can't make me feel worthless, because I finally believe I'm not. That's what you gave me. Proof that his judgment was always wrong. Good. He pulled the letter from my hands and deliberately tore it in half. Then we never speak of him again unless absolutely necessary. He doesn't deserve space in your thoughts. Calliope cleared her throat. While that's very cathartic, we should discuss the territorial visits. The Eastern Territory, Alpha Ivania's domain, has formally invited you both to attend their Harvest Festival in 2 weeks. It's a significant honor. The festival is their largest annual gathering, with all 12 packs in the territory attending. Why would she invite us? I wrote. She barely supported the ceremony. Because she's smart, Calliope said. Having you there, visibly present and participating, sends a message that the Silverpine Pack, and by extension, the entire Eastern Territory, recognizes your legitimacy. It strengthens your position before Theron's competency review. Valor wrote. It also puts us in a vulnerable position. Large gathering, multiple packs, plenty of opportunities for someone to cause problems.
True.
But refusing would be seen as weakness. As hiding. Theron's already spreading rumors that you're afraid to appear publicly, that you're governing from behind castle walls because you can't handle real leadership. Of course he is, I wrote. So we go. We attend the festival, We prove we're not hiding, and we show the Eastern Territory that silent leadership works. It won't be easy, Calliope warned. Harvest festivals are loud, chaotic events. Lots of howling, lots of pack songs, lots of verbal storytelling. You'll be surrounded by everything you can't participate in. Then we'll participate differently, Valor wrote. Show them that presence matters more than volume. 2 weeks later, we traveled east through territories I'd only read about. The landscape shifted from the castle's mountainous region to rolling hills covered in amber grain fields ready for harvest. The air smelled of sun-warmed earth and ripening crops, and everywhere we looked, wolves worked in coordinated teams, cutting grain, bundling stalks, singing work songs that made the labor rhythmic. I watched from the carriage window, feeling the familiar ache of exclusion. These wolves were connected through sound, through shared songs that had been passed down for generations. And I could never be part of that, no matter how much I wanted to. Valor's hand found mine, squeezing gently. He wrote on a small slate board, "You're thinking too loud." I'm not thinking, I'm observing. You're comparing. Seeing what you can't do instead of what you can. It's hard not to when we're surrounded by it. I know. He set down the slate, traced on my palm instead. But watch what else is happening. See the wolves coordinating without song. The ones using hand signals because the work is too loud for hearing. The ones who lead through example rather than voice. I looked more carefully. He was right, not every wolf was singing. Some moved through the field silently, their leadership obvious in how others followed their movements, mirrored their techniques, learned through watching rather than listening. Silent leadership exists everywhere, I traced back. We just have to look for it. Exactly. And tonight, at the festival, we'll show them that silence can be just as powerful as any song. The Silverpine Pack's central gathering grounds were transformed for the festival. Massive bonfires lit the evening sky, their smoke carrying the scent of roasting meat. Tables groaned under the weight of harvest bounty, grain breads, vegetable stews, fruit pies, and meat in quantities that suggested a very long night ahead. And wolves. Hundreds of them from all 12 packs in the territory, their voices rising in greeting, in laughter, in the kind of joyful chaos that comes from a community celebrating together. We arrived as the sun set, painting everything gold and crimson. Alpha Evania met us at the territory border with a formal delegation. Your Majesty, formal companion Thorne, she said, bowing slightly. The Eastern Territory welcomes you. We're honored by your presence. Valor wrote, "Thank you for the invitation. We're honored to participate. What can we do to help?" I added, "We don't want to be decorative guests. We want to contribute." Evania's eyebrows rose. "You want to work? If that's acceptable. We came to show that we're part of the territories, not above them. What better way than participating in the harvest?" A slow smile spread across Evania's face. The king offered to work the harvest festival. Theron will absolutely hate this. She gestured toward the fields. There's still bundling to be done before the final feast. If you're serious, we can always use more hands. We worked until dark, Valor and I side by side in the grain fields, learning to bundle stalks properly from wolves who were initially shocked and then increasingly delighted to have royalty working alongside them. I couldn't sing the work songs, but I could learn the rhythm, could time my movements to match the cadence. Valor couldn't call out coordination, but he could demonstrate technique, could help younger wolves perfect their form through patient showing rather than telling. And slowly, the wolves around us began to adapt. Began using hand signals when they couldn't hear over the work noise. Began demonstrating rather than explaining. Began finding ways to include us that didn't require sound. By the time we finished, my hands were blistered and my back ached, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like I belonged. Like I was part of something larger than myself, contributing in ways that mattered despite my difference. This is what leadership looks like, I wrote to Valor as we washed up before the feast. Not commanding from a distance, but working alongside. Showing rather than telling. Your hands are bleeding, he wrote back, gently examining my palms. So are yours. Worth it though. Did you see their faces? They went from skeptical to accepting in the span of a few hours. Because we showed them we're willing to work, willing to adapt, willing to be part of the community rather than above it. The feast that followed was magnificent and overwhelming. Long tables arranged in a circle around the central bonfire, wolves from all 12 packs mixing freely, sharing food and stories and the kind of easy companionship that came from shared labor. We sat at the head table with Ivania and her senior pack members. The noise was tremendous. Hundreds of conversations happening simultaneously, punctuated by bursts of laughter and occasional howls of celebration. I felt Valor tense beside me and saw him press his hand to his throat in that reflexive gesture. Being surrounded by so much sound, by so much vocal connection he couldn't participate in, was clearly taking its toll. "Are you okay?" I traced his palm. "Overwhelmed, but okay. We can leave if you need to."
No.
"We need to be here. Need to show we can exist in spaces like this without requiring everyone to accommodate us." As the meal progressed, wolves began approaching our table, some curious, some respectful, some clearly skeptical. A young Omega, maybe 16, approached nervously. "Formal companion, Thorne? I'm Merowyn, from the Clearwater Pack."
I
wanted to say thank you.
For what?
I wrote. For existing. For showing that Omegas can be more than what everyone expects. I can't howl either, not loudly enough to matter anyway. My pack says I'm deficient. But seeing you here, having gained such status despite your silence. Her eyes filled with tears. It gives me hope. I felt my chest tighten. You're not deficient. You're different. And different can be powerful if you let it be. Is that how you survived? By accepting your difference? No, I wrote honestly. I survived by refusing to believe I was less than others just because I was different. It took years. It's still hard some days. But Merowyn, your worth isn't determined by volume. It's determined by character, by contribution, by the kind of wolf you choose to be. She read my words several times, then bowed deeply. Thank you. I'll remember that. After she left, more came. Some with similar stories of being different, of struggling to fit pack molds that didn't accommodate variation. Others were just curious about what it was like being the king's companion, about how we communicated, about whether love could really exist without words. To each, I offered honesty. About the difficulty, about the loneliness I'd experienced, about the ongoing challenge of existing in a world built for wolves unlike me. But also about the unexpected gifts, the observation skills I'd developed, the written eloquence I'd cultivated, the strength that came from building my own worth rather than relying on others' validation. And Valor, beside me, added his own writings about leading through listening, about strength that didn't require dominance, about how the curse had forced him to develop forms of leadership he'd never have discovered otherwise. We were honest about the pain and the beauty, about the cost and the reward, about how being different was both a burden and a gift depending on how you held it. Near midnight, when the feast had evolved into smaller conversations and the bonfires had burned down to coals, Ivania approached us. "Walk with me," she said. "There's something you should see." We followed her away from the gathering grounds into the quiet darkness of the grain fields. The moon hung full overhead, painting everything silver. "Do you know what the Harvest Festival is really about?" Ivania asked. Valor shook his head. "It's about acknowledging that we all contribute differently. Some wolves sing the work songs. Others cut grain. Others bundle stalks. Some cook, others organize. Others just maintain morale through presence. The harvest requires all of it, loud contributions and quiet ones, visible work and invisible support. No single role is more valuable than another." She turned to face us. "When I invited you here, it was partly political, showing support for your union. But watching you today, working alongside my wolves, adapting to our customs while staying authentically yourselves, I realized something. You're not performing leadership. You're embodying a different kind of it. One that's been missing from our territories." "What kind?" I wrote. "Leadership through service. Through genuine presence. Through adapting while maintaining integrity." She smiled. Theron believes power comes from dominance, from being the loudest voice. But watching you today, I remembered that some of our greatest leaders were quiet ones. Wolves who led through example rather than command, who listened more than they spoke, who made others feel valued rather than subordinated. She pulled out a formal document. The Eastern Territory formally endorses your leadership. All 12 packs witnessed your presence here tonight. All 12 saw you work, saw you adapt, saw you connect with wolves across all ranks. When Theron calls his competency review in 6 weeks, the Eastern Territory will stand with you. Vaylor's hand found mine, squeezing hard. He wrote, "Thank you. This means more than you know." "Don't thank me. You earned this. Both of you." Ivania's expression grew serious. "But understand, Theron isn't going to back down. If anything, your success here will make him more desperate. Desperate wolves are dangerous." "We know," I wrote. "We're prepared." "Are you?" "Because preparation isn't just about politics. It's about being ready for whatever methods he might use. Legal challenges, yes, but also more direct approaches, like the assassins who attacked you weeks ago." "You knew about that?" "I know everything that happens in the territories. And I know Theron doesn't make mistakes. He makes calculated moves. Those assassins were meant to scare you away. When that doesn't work, he'll escalate." "What are you suggesting?" Vaylor wrote, "I'm suggesting you accept my offer of Eastern Territory guards. Wolves who will protect you not just because you're their king, but because you've proven you're worth protecting." She gestured back toward the celebration. "You made connections tonight. Real ones. Use them. Build a network of wolves who believe in what you're doing, who will stand between you and whatever Theron throws at you next." "We're not used to asking for help," I wrote. "Then learn. Because you can't do this alone. Revolution requires community." Ivania smiled. "And make no mistake, what you're doing is revolution. You're challenging centuries of belief about how wolves should be, how leaders should lead, how worth should be measured. That's not going to be won by 2 wolves standing alone against the tide. It's going to be won by building a tide of your own." We returned to the castle 3 days later, exhausted but bolstered by the Eastern Territory's support. The Harvest Festival had been more successful than we'd dared hope, not just politically, but personally. We'd connected with wolves who saw themselves in our struggles, who were hungry for a different model of leadership, who wanted to believe that difference could be strength. But Calliope's expression when we arrived warned us that good news was about to be balanced by bad. "Theron has moved up the competency review," she said without preamble. "Instead of 3 months, we have 4 weeks. He's claiming urgent kingdom business requires immediate resolution about the crown's stability." "He's scared," I wrote. The Eastern Territory's endorsement rattled him. "Yes. But scared means desperate. And desperate means unpredictable." Calliope spread reports across the library table. "He's been meeting with the Northern and Western Territories, building his coalition. He's gathered evidence, carefully selected incidents that he'll spin as proof of incompetence. And he's preparing character witnesses who will testify that you're unfit." "What evidence?" Vaylor wrote, "The territorial dispute you resolved through negotiation. He's framing it as you being too weak to allow traditional challenge. Your choice of Lunara as formal companion, presented as prioritizing personal feelings over kingdom welfare. The modifications you've made to council procedures to accommodate your silence, portrayed as demanding special treatment rather than making reasonable accommodations. It's all twisted," I wrote, "taking our strengths and reframing them as weaknesses." "Exactly. And it will be effective with wolves who already distrust change. We need to prepare a defense. Show not just that you're competent, but that your different approach to leadership is actually superior to traditional methods." "In 4 weeks, Vaylor wrote flatly. "In 4 weeks, Calliope confirmed. We spent the rest of the evening planning strategy, reaching out to supportive territories, preparing documentation of every successful policy, every resolved conflict, every innovation that had worked despite being unconventional. But as night fell and Vaylor and I retreated to our chambers, I felt doubt creeping in like cold water. What if we can't do it?" I wrote. "What if 4 weeks isn't enough time? What if Theron wins? and we lose everything. Valor pulled me close, his arms solid and warm around me. He wrote on a slate board he kept by the bed. Then we lose the crown but keep each other. Keep the connections we've built. Keep the wolves who believe in us. Theron can take my title, but he can't take what matters most, the truth that we've been living. That silent wolves can lead. That difference can be beautiful. That love is its own form of strength. You'd really give up being king? I'd give up anything before I'd give up on you. Before I'd give up authenticity. Before I'd go back to performing leadership while hating myself. He touched my face gently. But Lunara, I don't think we're going to lose. I think we're going to show the territory something they've never seen before. Silent leadership that's more effective than the loudest howl. And I think Theron is going to regret underestimating us. Your optimism is still exhausting, but also contagious? I smiled despite everything. Maybe a little. We fell asleep tangled together, for weeks stretching ahead like a battlefield we'd have to cross. But for tonight, we had each other. Had proof that our different kinds of leadership could work. Had hope that maybe, just maybe, the territories were ready for change. And in the darkness, I allowed myself to believe what Valor believed, that we weren't going to lose. We were going to win. Not through being louder or stronger or more traditional than Theron, but by being so completely, authentically ourselves that even our enemies couldn't deny the truth. That silence could speak volumes. That broken wolves could build beautiful things. That love was the most revolutionary act of all. Chapter 13. The Trial of Silence. For weeks passed like falling through water, slow and fast simultaneously, each day heavy with preparation, yet somehow slipping away before we were ready. We visited the Southern Territory, where Alpha Lorcan's cautious support solidified into a genuine alliance after Valor helped negotiate a trade dispute that had been festering for years. We spent days in the Coastal Territory, one of the undecided regions, working with fishing communities and learning the unique challenges of packs whose livelihood came from the sea rather than the land. Everywhere we went, we worked, not as king and companion observing from a distance, but as wolves contributing to the community. Valor's written directives proved more thoughtful than shouted commands. He had time to consider his words, to craft precise guidance that left no room for misinterpretation. My observations, documented carefully and shared with local leaders, revealed patterns and inefficiencies that vocal leaders had been too busy talking to notice. We were building something. A network of wolves who'd seen us work, who'd benefited from our different approach, who were beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, leadership didn't require the loudest howl. But we could feel Theron's shadow growing as the review date approached. Reports came of him visiting territories, giving speeches about tradition and strength, painting us as dangerous radicals who threatened everything wolves held sacred. He's effective, Calliope said one evening, a week before the review. His messaging is simple, emotionally resonant, and plays on deep-seated fears about change. The cursed king and his broken companion will weaken us all. It's reductive, but it works. How do we counter it? I wrote. By being undeniable. By showing up at the review with so much evidence of effective leadership that even his supporters can't ignore it. By making the choice clear, tradition that maintains power structures, or innovation that actually serves the territories. Valor wrote. And if that's not enough? If the council votes against us anyway? Calliope was quiet for a moment. Then we have contingency plans. But, Your Majesty, I don't think it will come to that. You've built real support. Wolves who will stand with you not because of political calculation, but because you've proven you deserve their loyalty. I hope you're right, I wrote. Because I don't know what happens to us if you're wrong. The competency review was held in the Grand Council chamber, a space I'd only heard about but never seen. It was designed for judgment, for spectacle, for making whoever stood at its center feel small and exposed. The chamber was circular, with tiered seating rising up all around a central platform. The 7 council alphas sat in ornate chairs at ground level, while hundreds of witnesses filled the upper tiers. Every significant pack in the 7 territories had sent representatives. The room hummed with anticipation and barely suppressed hostility. Valor and I stood on the central platform, hands joined, facing the council. We'd dress formally, but not ostentatiously. Valor in deep blue with silver threading, me in a gown the color of midnight with embroidery that caught the light. We looked like leaders. Now we had to prove we were. Theron stood to open the proceedings. He wore red, a deliberate choice, the color of blood and dominance and traditional alpha power. Council members, witnesses, fellow wolves, his voice carried perfectly through the chamber. We gather today to address a question that should never have needed asking. Is our king fit to rule? For 7 years, we've watched King Valor struggle under his curse. We've been patient. We've hoped for recovery. We've maintained faith. He paused, letting his words settle. But patience has limits. Faith requires evidence. And recently, we've seen His Majesty make choices that call his judgment into question. Most significantly, his gaze swept over me with barely concealed contempt, taking a voiceless, Baron Omega as his formal companion, choosing personal comfort over kingdom welfare, prioritizing his own desires over the succession, over tradition, over everything that makes us strong. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some agreeing, others uncertain. Today, we will examine the evidence. We will hear testimony about His Majesty's leadership, or lack thereof. And we will determine whether the 7 territories are best served by a king who embraces his curse, or whether we need someone who embodies the strength our species was built on. He sat, and Alpha Yvain of the Northern Territory stood. I call the first witness, Beta Silas of the Western Territory. Please describe the king's response to your region's drought crisis last spring. A middle-aged wolf stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. The Western Territory experienced severe drought. Crops failing, water sources running dry. We requested emergency aid from the Crown. His Majesty's response came in writing, detailed instructions for water conservation, redistribution of resources, technical guidance for irrigation systems. And how effective was this written response? Yvain pressed. Very effective, actually. The technical guidance was more precise than we typically receive. Written instructions meant we could reference them repeatedly, share them across all packs. We resolved the crisis within 6 weeks. Yvain's expression soured. Clearly, this wasn't the testimony she'd expected. But wouldn't verbal commands have been faster? Possibly, but less accurate. When instructions are shouted, wolves forget details. When they're written, there's no ambiguity. Silas glanced at Valor apologetically. I'm sorry, Alpha Yvain, but the truth is His Majesty's written leadership was more effective than the verbal commands we'd received from previous administrations. Theron stood abruptly. Thank you, Beta Silas. I call my next witness, Alpha Hadrian of the Clearwater Pack. Please describe the incident at the territorial border 3 months ago. A young Alpha stepped forward, his expression smug. There was a border dispute between Clearwater and Riversong packs. Traditionally, such disputes are resolved through Alpha Challenge, fight until one submits, winner takes disputed territory. His Majesty intervened, insisting on negotiation instead. And the result? Theron prompted. Both packs were forced to compromise. Both gave up claims to parts of the territory. Neither got what they wanted. Both felt diminished by the process. So the king's intervention, his preference for negotiation over traditional challenge, left both packs weaker? Yes. I squeezed Valor's hand, feeling his frustration. This was exactly the narrative Theron wanted to build, that our different approach left everyone worse off. But then Alpha Lorcan stood. I have a question for Alpha Hadrian. How many casualties would traditional challenges have caused? Hadrian blinked. What? How many wolves would have been injured or killed if you and Alpha Tessa of Riversong had fought until submission? Give me an estimate. Perhaps 5 or 6 serious injuries. Maybe 1 death if the fight went badly. And under the compromise His Majesty negotiated, how many casualties? None, but none, Lorcan repeated firmly. 0 wolves injured or killed. Both packs maintain their populations, their workforce, and their fighting strength. That doesn't sound like weakness to me. That sounds like a leader prioritizing his people's lives over their pride. Murmurs again, but different this time. Thoughtful rather than hostile. Theron's jaw clenched. I call formal companion Lunara Thorne to testify. My heart stopped. We'd anticipated this, had prepared for it, but actually standing up to speak, to write, before hundreds of judging eyes was different from preparation. I stepped forward, my chalkboard ready. Miss Thorne. Theron's voice was silk over steel. You've been the king's companion for several months now. In that time, have you witnessed any moments where His Majesty's inability to speak caused problems? Where did his curse create difficulties in governance? It was a trap. If I said yes, I gave him ammunition. If I said no, I'd be lying, and witnesses would contradict me. I wrote carefully, yes. There have been moments where immediate vocal response would have been faster, where emergencies required quick verbal coordination, where the curse has been a genuine obstacle. So, you admit the curse weakens his leadership? I admit the curse creates challenges. But challenges aren't the same as weaknesses. Every leader has obstacles to overcome. Valar's curse forced him to develop other strengths: precision in written communication, patience in decision-making, the ability to truly listen before responding. These aren't compensations for weakness. They're genuine leadership skills that many verbal leaders lack. Pretty words. But Miss Thorne, you cannot howl.
You cannot speak.
You are, by any objective measure, less capable than a standard Omega. Why should the territories trust that your influence on the king isn't making him weaker? That you're not normalizing deficiency? The chamber went utterly silent. I felt Valar tense beside me, felt his protective instinct warring with his commitment to let me defend myself. I wrote slowly, making sure every word was visible. Council Alpha Theron, you're right that I cannot howl or speak. But I can read 6 languages. I can document observations with precision that verbal reports never achieve. I can remain calm in crisis because I'm not competing to be heard. I can connect with wolves across all ranks because I don't intimidate through dominance. Are these weaknesses? Or are they simply different strengths that you don't recognize because they don't match your narrow definition? I held up the board, let the words sink in, then continued. You call me deficient, but I've helped negotiate peace between warring packs. I've worked harvests alongside territorial wolves and earned their respect through contribution rather than command. I've shown young wolves who feel broken that different doesn't mean less. What have you done lately besides try to tear down wolves who threaten your worldview? The chamber erupted. Some wolves shouting agreement, others protesting, Theron's face darkening with rage. Order. Alpha Yvain's voice cut through the chaos. Miss Thorne, that was inappropriate. But honest, Alpha Ivania interrupted, standing. And that's what this review should be about. Honest assessment of leadership effectiveness, not performance of traditional strength. I've seen these 2 wolves work. I've watched them adapt, contribute, lead through example rather than command. The Eastern Territory stands by its endorsement. King Valar is fit to rule. Alpha Darius stood. The Southern Territory agrees. His written leadership has been more effective than the shouted commands we've endured from previous administrations. Lorcan rose. The Southern Territory supports the Crown. His Majesty has proven that different methods can achieve better results. 3 territories in clear support, but 4 remained: Theron's Western, Yvain's Northern, and the 2 undecided regions, Coastal and Central. Alpha Ridian of the Coastal Territory stood. He was ancient, scarred from decades of leadership, his eyes sharp despite his age. I've been Alpha for 40 years, he said quietly. I've served under 3 kings. I've seen leadership performed in many ways, through dominance, through wisdom, through compromise. And I'll tell you what I've learned. The best leaders are the ones who adapt to circumstances rather than forcing circumstances to adapt to them. He turned to face Valar directly. Your Majesty, your curse forced you to adapt. Forced you to lead differently. Some call that weakness. I call it evolution. The territories are changing, more trade, more communication, more complexity. We need leaders who can navigate that complexity, who can listen before deciding, who can find creative solutions rather than falling back on how we've always done things. He looked at the assembled council. The coastal territory supports King Valor. And more than that, we thank him for showing us that strength comes in many forms. For territories now, half the council. Everyone turned to the last undecided region, the Central Territory, represented by Alpha Cassius, a middle-aged wolf known for careful neutrality. The Central Territory has watched this debate with great interest, Cassius said slowly. We've examined the evidence, listened to testimony, considered both traditional values and innovative approaches. He paused, and I felt the entire chamber hold its breath. We believe King Valor is fit to rule. However, he raised a hand as relieved murmurs began. We have conditions. We want quarterly reports on kingdom stability. We want continued evidence that his different approach is producing results. We want proof that embracing difference strengthens rather than weakens us. Give us that, Your Majesty, and you have our support. 5 territories in support. A clear majority. But Theron wasn't finished. A majority supports maintaining the current king. But that doesn't resolve the underlying question. The crown cannot remain in limbo forever. His Majesty has no heir, no succession plan, no guarantee of stability beyond his own lifetime. What happens when the curse finally kills him? Because it will, the healers have said as much. Without a blood heir, without traditional succession, we face chaos. He turned to address the full chamber. I propose a compromise. King Valor remains on the throne for now, with the council's conditional support. But he must name a successor within 1 year. Someone who can provide traditional leadership, who can ensure stability, who can... No, Valor wrote, the word large enough for everyone to see. He held it up, then wrote more. I will not name a successor chosen to appease you. I will not promise to find someone traditional to replace me. If the territories want me as king, they accept that I will rule my way, different, yes, but effective. They accept that Lunara is my companion, that our leadership is a partnership, that we represent a different model of how wolves can be. He showed the board to the entire chamber, his expression fierce. The curse may kill me eventually. But until it does, I will lead authentically. I will show that silent wolves can be strong. I will prove that different doesn't mean deficient. And I will not apologize for loving someone who sees me clearly and chooses me anyway. You either accept all of this or you find another king. Those are your options. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Alpha Evania began to clap. Slow, deliberate applause that echoed through the chamber. Alpha Darius joined her. Then Lorcan. Then Ridian. Then Cassius. Then wolves in the upper tiers. Then more, until the sound became a wave that drowned out Theron's protests. The cursed king had drawn his line. And the territories, most of them, had chosen to stand on his side of it. The vote was formal but anticlimactic. 5 territories supported Valor's continued rule. 2 opposed. The competency review was concluded with the king's fitness confirmed. But as we left the chamber, Theron caught my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won? You've won one battle. But the war continues. Every day you're in power, I'll be working to undermine you. Every policy you implement, I'll oppose. Every innovation you try, I'll sabotage. You may have survived today, but you'll spend the rest of your reign looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll strike next. I pulled my arm from his grip and wrote calmly. Good. Because every day you oppose us, you prove how terrified you are of change. How desperate you are to maintain power structures that benefit you at others' expense. Every sabotage attempt reveals your weakness, not ours. So please keep fighting us. Keep showing the territories exactly what we're standing against. His eyes narrowed with pure hatred. You'll regret this. No, I wrote. You will. Because we're not going away. We're not giving up. We're going to keep leading differently, keep proving that silence can be strength, keep building a kingdom that has space for wolves like us. And there's nothing you can do to stop that except reveal yourself as exactly what you are, a bully who can't handle losing control. I turned away, leaving him standing in the corridor with his rage and his fear and his desperate need for dominance. Valor waited for me outside, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He pulled me into his arms, and we stood there for a long moment, holding each other up. We survived, I traced on his palm. We won, he traced back.
Now what?
Now we lead. Actually lead, not just defend our right to. We implement the policies we've been planning. We strengthen alliances. We show the territories that their faith in us wasn't misplaced. And when Theron tries to sabotage us, we handle it. Together. Like we handle everything. Calliope found us like that, locked together in the aftermath of victory. The territories want a statement. Some formal declaration of your intentions moving forward. Valor pulled out his writing materials, considered for a moment, then wrote. To the 7 territories. Today, you chose evolution over stagnation. You chose to believe that leadership comes in many forms, that strength doesn't require volume, that different wolves can build beautiful things. We will not waste your faith. We will lead with authenticity, with innovation, with commitment to all wolves, not just those who fit traditional molds. We will make mistakes because that's what happens when you try new approaches. But we will learn from them. We will adapt. We will show you that the risk of changing is worth the reward. Thank you for believing in us. We will not let you down. Calliope read it aloud, nodded. It's perfect. I'll distribute it to all 7 territories by morning. That night, Valor and I returned to the rooftop garden, our sanctuary, our place of peace. The moonflowers were blooming, glowing in the darkness, more beautiful for never needing our voices to trigger their opening. I can't believe we actually won, I wrote. We won this round, Valor corrected. The larger battle, proving that difference can work long-term, that's going to take years, maybe decades. Are you prepared for that? For a lifetime of defending our right to exist as we are? He took the chalk from my hand, wrote on my board, I'm prepared for a lifetime with you. If that lifetime includes defending our choices, so be it. But Lunara, today proved something. We're not alone. There are wolves who want what we're offering, who are hungry for a different model of leadership, of community, of being. We're not fighting against the entire world. We're leading a revolution, and revolutions require patience. And courage. We have that. We proved it today. He set down the board, cupped my face in his hands. You were magnificent in that chamber. The way you stood up to Theron, the way you refused to be intimidated, the way you defended not just us but every wolf who's ever felt different. I was terrified. And magnificent. Both can be true. I leaned into him, breathing in his scent, feeling his heartbeat steady against my cheek. I love you, I signed, the gesture he'd learned to read perfectly. Not despite the challenges, but including them. Not despite the ongoing battle, but because of it. Because you chose me when you could have chosen easier. Because you chose authenticity when you could have chosen comfort. I love you too, he signed back. My voiceless, brilliant, revolutionary companion. My partner in challenging everything wolves thought they knew about leadership. My proof that broken pieces can build something beautiful. We stood in the garden until dawn, surrounded by moonflowers and silence, and the knowledge that we'd survived an attempt to tear us down. But survival wasn't enough. We'd committed to more than survival. We're committed to transformation. To show the territories that are different could be powerful. To build a kingdom that had space for all wolves, loud and quiet, traditional and innovative, conforming and divergent. It would be hard. Theron would never stop opposing us. There would be more challenges, more attempts to undermine our authority, more battles to fight. But we had each other. Had allies who believed in what we were building. Had proof that change was possible. And we had something else, something Theron could never understand or take from us. We had found our voices in silence. Had learned that the most powerful truths sometimes required no sound at all. Had discovered that love was the most revolutionary act of all. The sun rose over the castle, painting the garden in shades of gold and rose. A new day. A new beginning. A chance to prove that the faith the territories had placed in us was worth it.
Ready?
I traced it on Valor's palm. Always he traced back. And together, the cursed king and his voiceless companion, the wolves who refused to be broken by their differences, the leaders who proved that silence could speak volumes, we walked into the dawn, into our future, into the revolution we'd started simply by being authentically, unapologetically ourselves. 3 years later, the library had expanded. Not just the castle's collection, but libraries throughout the 7 territories, places where wolves could learn to communicate through writing, where different forms of expression were celebrated rather than merely tolerated. I stood in one now, in the Eastern Territory, watching young wolves huddle over slates and paper, learning that volume wasn't the only way to be heard. Merowyn, the young Omega I'd met at the Harvest Festival, had become a teacher here. Her quiet voice, once seen as deficiency, now guided students through written exercises, through learning to express themselves in ways that didn't require perfect howls. Formal companion Thorne, she greeted me with a bow. We've been expecting you. How many students now? I wrote. 43 in this location alone. 52 in the Northern Library. 38 in the coastal region. The program is growing faster than we can train teachers. Her smile was proud, because it turns out there are a lot of wolves who don't fit standard communication models, who've been suffering in silence, thinking they were broken. Now they have alternatives. I moved through the library, watching wolves who would have been marginalized in traditional packs finding their voices, written, signed, expressed through art or mathematics or any of a dozen non-vocal methods. This was what victory looked like. Not a single dramatic moment, but a slow, steady transformation of how the territories understood worth and contribution. Valor waited outside, having just finished a meeting with local pack leaders about trade agreements. He developed a reputation for written diplomacy that was more effective than shouted negotiations. His carefully crafted treaties left no room for misinterpretation, no opportunity for later claims of, "I didn't hear that," or, "That's not what was said." How did it go? I traced his palm. Successfully. 3 packs agreed to resource sharing that would have taken months of verbal negotiation. Writing forces precision. Forces people to actually think about what they're agreeing to.
Theron?
Valor's expression darkened slightly. Still opposing everything we do. Still spreading narratives about weakness and decline. But his influence is waning. Even his own territory is questioning his leadership style. Turns out constantly fighting against progress isn't a sustainable political strategy. We walked through the territory together, hands joined, our presence no longer causing shocked whispers, but rather acknowledging nods. We'd become familiar. The cursed king and his voiceless companion, still different, still leading unconventionally, but proven. 3 years of policies that worked. 3 years of conflicts resolved without bloodshed. 3 years of showing that different approaches could produce better results. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, attempts at sabotage, political maneuvering, moments when failure seemed inevitable. But we persisted, adapted, learned,
Grown.
and slowly the territories had grown with us. Your Majesty, we turned to find a messenger running toward us, breathless. News from the Western Territory. Alpha Theron has been challenged by one of his own pack members. Beta Kalen is calling for leadership change, citing Theron's obsession with opposing the crown over serving his own territory's needs. Valor and I exchanged glances.
Karma, I traced.
Justice, he traced back. The messenger continued. Beta Kalen's platform is about embracing new leadership models, about learning from the crown's innovations rather than fighting them. If he wins, when he wins, most predict, the Western Territory will become the crown's ally rather than its opponent. After the messenger left, Valor pulled me close. 7 years ago, I was cursed into silence and thought my life was over. Thought I'd lost everything that made me who I was.
And now?
Now I know I was wrong. The curse didn't take who I was, it revealed it. Forced me to stop performing and start being authentic. Led me to you. Led us to this. He gestured at the library, at the territory, at the world we were slowly reshaping. I wouldn't change any of it. Wouldn't trade the silence for my voice back if it meant losing what we've built. Not even to howl, I traced. To sing? To speak without needing paper? He considered this seriously. Sometimes I miss it. Miss the ease of verbal communication. But Lunara, I've learned to speak in ways that voice never allowed. Through precision and patience and presence. Through you, showing me that there are languages beyond sound.
No.
I wouldn't trade it. This is who I am. We are who we are. And that's enough. I kissed him then, there in the Eastern Territories' Central Square, where 3 years ago we would have caused scandal. Now wolves just smiled and moved around us, giving us space for a moment. Do you think we've succeeded? I traced. Changed enough? Proven enough?
We've started something.
A shift in how the territories understand strength and leadership and worth. But true change takes generations. We're just the beginning. Then what's our role now? He smiled. We keep leading authentically. Keep showing young wolves like Merowyn that different doesn't mean broken. Keep building systems that accommodate variation rather than punishing it. Keep loving each other loudly despite our silence. And we trust that the seeds we're planting will grow long after we're gone. That's a long-term vision. I'm planning a long-term life with you. Seemed appropriate. We spent the rest of the day visiting territories, meeting with wolves whose lives had been changed by our leadership, documenting stories of transformation that we'd share with the council, building evidence that different works, that silent voice could still be heard. That love was, indeed, revolutionary. As night fell, we returned to the castle, to our rooftop garden where moonflowers bloomed without needing our permission. Do you ever regret it? I traced. Choosing me? Making everything harder by refusing to choose someone traditional? Valor took my hands, held them between his own. In the moonlight, I could see silver strands threading through his dark hair. We were aging, the curse no longer killing him but still present, still part of who he was. He signed slowly, deliberately. Regret? Never. You are the best decision I ever made. The bravest choice. The most honest commitment. Everything good in my reign, everything meaningful in my life, traces back to the moment you walked into that testing chamber and showed me that broken wolves could still be beautiful. We're not broken, I signed back. Just different.
Exactly.
And different is enough. Different is powerful. Different is what changes the world. We stood in our garden, two wolves who couldn't howl but who'd learned to speak volumes anyway. Who'd faced down an entire system built on dominance and said, there's another way. Who'd chosen each other when everyone said we shouldn't. Who'd proven that silence could be strength. The moon hung full overhead, and from the territories below, we heard the evening howls rising, hundreds of wolves singing their pack songs, their voices joining in traditional harmony. And we stood silent amid it all, holding each other, adding our presence to the chorus even if we couldn't add our voices. Because that was the truth we'd learned, the lesson we'd spent 3 years teaching. You don't have to howl to be heard. You don't have to dominate to lead. You don't have to conform to have worth. You just have to be authentically, courageously, and unapologetically yourself. And trust that somewhere, somehow, other wolves will see you and say,
Yes.
That's who I want to be too. The Silence King and his voiceless companion. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was fixed and perfect, but a real ending where broken pieces had built something beautiful, where difference was celebrated rather than cured, where love spoke louder than any howl. And that was more than enough. That was everything. The end. Thank you for experiencing Lunara and Valor's journey. A story about finding your voice in silence, about loving someone who sees you completely, and about proving that the most powerful revolution starts with accepting yourself exactly as you are. If this tale of two wolves who couldn't howl but learned to lead anyway resonated with you, remember, your worth isn't determined by volume, by conformity, or by fitting into boxes others built. You are enough, exactly as you are. Your silence is its own form of speaking. Your difference is your strength. Now go forth and be unapologetically, authentically you. The world needs your unique voice, however you choose to express it. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for more original werewolf romance stories that celebrate difference, authenticity, and revolutionary love.